Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Serving the CEO by Emily Hayes. Narrated by Abby Craden. Chapter 1. Austin's Not Lousy Day. Austin didn't believe in waking up on the wrong side of the bed until today. The best and only way to describe this day was lousy from beginning to end. No concessions. At least this is what she thought when she started writing her journal before heading to work. She had now made it home and was looking at the entry with the word lousy in different colors and styles in her journal. She had flirted with writing another word, only to realize no other word would suffice at that point. Picking up her journal entry, she smiled as she considered the rest of the day. As a day, it had begun like any other, with a cup of green tea, a little meditation, and working on her commissioned pet portrait for her landlady who lived upstairs. It seemed maybe, just maybe, to be survivable. Yes, she had got her period and had bad cramps. She didn't really feel like going to work in the evening, but the day would be manageable with the right cocktail of caring for herself, mindfulness, painkillers, and a bucket of tea. Austin continued her scribbling while processing the events of the day. She had persuaded herself to get to work on painting the Russian blue called Pebbles. The deadline for the commission was approaching, and it still needed 2 more layers of paint than varnish. Just enough time to finish it if she worked for a few hours today. It was her habit to open the French windows of her small studio apartment while painting. This was to avoid breathing in any fumes from paint thinners and other oil painting mediums. It was a beautiful day. The rays of the sun kissed her forehead as she placed her canvas and got to work. Out of nowhere, she had heard a noise behind her. It sounded like a can falling to the ground, followed by a wet sloshing sound. Perplexed, Austin turned around only to see black paint scattered everywhere on the floor and a pigeon flapping around behind her. The pigeon was covered in paint, scattering it everywhere while flailing its wings. Poor bird, thought Austin, not giving much consideration to anything but helping the bird. She ran to the bathroom to grab a towel when she heard another loud, even more ominous sound coming from her workspace. Towel in hand, Austin took the 2 required steps to see what had happened, but her heart was pounding. She knew it was the painting. She ran up to it, but it was no use. The easel had fallen face down into the black paint. Austin felt the tears start to sting the corners of her eyes. She removed her glasses to wipe away the salty liquid, feeling completely overwhelmed. She didn't know whether to grab the pigeon, the painting, or whether just to run outside. Just at that moment, she felt her phone vibrating in her pocket. Looking for an escape from the situation, she took 2 deep breaths in, then pulled it out to answer. It was her brother Paris. Austin couldn't stop the sobs once she heard the familiar voice greeting her. "Hello, sis!" All she could manage in response was blubbers of tears and sobs. Paris was immediately concerned, slowly gathering what had happened between her snuffles. Once he had understood, he started giggling. The giggles grew louder and louder, and without realizing it, Austin was laughing while crying too. It was quite hilarious, albeit tragic. "Sis, you should close the window, otherwise a paint-covered pigeon will make an escape." Austin was grateful to receive the instruction as it helped unfreeze her. She closed the windows, then looked at the poor helpless bird. "Any ideas about how to get the paint off her?" she asked Paris, hoping he'd come across something useful in his work at the veterinary clinic. "It's always a her with you, isn't it?" teased Paris. "Simple. You catch her and put her in the cat basket I left there, and I'll be there in 15 minutes to pick her up," he continued. Austin felt relieved that Paris had offered to help, but she didn't want to burden him. He was incredibly busy with his applications to the veterinary program, work, and final year of college. Hesitantly, she said, "Are you sure? I know how busy you've been
"Yes, I am. It's not often, miss. I can handle myself. Austin Adams needs help with anything,"
interrupted Paris jokingly. With that, the matter was settled. Capturing the pigeon was a sweaty workout, until the lure of some frozen peas and seed mix proved to be enough to calm even a paint-covered bird. Austin quickly cleared as much of the mess off the floor as she could. A lot of her books and sheets now had paint on them, but this was far from the end of the world. By the time Paris knocked on the door, the disaster was reduced to a 4 on the Richter scale from the original 9. The painting was wet when it fell into the paint, and she had to save materials, not lay down an intermediate layer of varnish, so it was practically completely ruined. Paris evaluated the pigeon immediately and seemed pleased none of the paint was on its face or eyes. He was going to take it with him to work where he hoped the veterinarian he was apprenticing with could give it a once-over and advice on how to best help it. They discussed life, the universe, and everything as they often did over a cup of tea, and agreed Austen would be buying dinner to make up for making him think something of the "grandma has died" scale had happened when she'd picked up the phone. Austen caught herself smiling while thinking about her much younger brother. At 22, he was 11 years her junior. He hadn't escaped their parents' place-naming tradition. Austen's mother was convinced she was going to have a boy and stuck with the name Austen when she had a girl. The polar opposite happened to Paris. Their mother was a very forward-thinking hippie type, and no one was going to pigeonhole her children because of their gender, appearance, or sexuality. Austen was now sketching her brother's face, which was remarkably similar to hers. Chiseled cheekbones, full lips, and gray eyes with a rim of blue. She captured his constantly teasing expression well. Austen sighed. There were quite a lot of lousy things to this day, but it did have some redeeming factors. She was beginning to see as she shifted her thoughts to her shift at the bar. Austen had taken the maximum suggested amount of painkillers, finished cleaning the apartment, and wistfully managed to start a new painting before going to her other work. She had been hoping for a quiet Wednesday evening shift, only 6 hours, but alas, the hotel she worked in was hosting a large tech conference. The bar was brimming with men in their 20s to 40s, and orders were coming at lightning speed. To make matters worse, one of the other staff members, Madeline, had called in sick, so the manager, Linda, asked Austen if she could work a double. Less than ideal, Austen had thought. But Linda had always been good to her, and leaving her in need wouldn't be fair. Besides, she could always use the extra money to treat her wonderful brother next week. The way to make good wages at the bar was to ensure customers were happy, and although the hourly wage was generous for a bar job, the tips could double or triple that if customers were pleased. All the staff knew this, and although it wasn't the kind of place full of targets and fake smiles, it was generally highly service-oriented. Austen had figured out that on top of being professional and friendly, giving the impression of being receptive to flirting without responding in an unprofessional manner was a benefit. This would make her a slightly richer woman, and she didn't mind playing that game. Nor did anyone in management care so long as the golden rule of never dating customers was not broken. Today, though, Austen was not in the mood. Especially not in the mood for sweaty IT crowd men goading her in various ways. She gracefully dealt with a number of situations while mixing and serving cocktails. Toward 11 p.m., the bar was quietening and the crowd was more mixed. A few middle-aged couples were taking their seats with glasses of wine and dainty plates. Austen was busy mixing drinks for the remaining 2 IT-type tables. She was trying to avoid speaking to a particular man who had made it his mission to harass her to the point where she nearly gave him the full force of the Austen mad response, as her family had called it when she became seriously enraged. He had commented on her boyish appearance, believed he was taunting when he suggested she was trans, and offered her his Long Island iced tea the last time she took orders for drinks. The other men seemed rather apologetic, which helped slightly. Austen was, however, seething while mixing the drink. Shaking the mixer while scanning the room, her eyes landed on a woman sitting alone at a window table. The woman was absolutely breathtaking. Everything about her was pure perfection, from her white, tightly fitted suit, hugging the most exquisite curves, to the lip color that suited her skin tone perfectly. She had eyelashes that extended all the way to Mars without looking unnatural, framing the most gorgeous golden brown eyes. "Ground control to Major Austen," said Linda, clearing her throat behind her and smiling. She hadn't missed the object of Austen's admiration. "Yes, boss? What can I do for you?" answered Austen, slightly blushing and keeping her gaze on the drinks. "I've asked Ron to cover the tables with a gentleman.
I think you need a break from them, and the front section requires someone with a little more customer experience," said Linda, while nodding at the beautiful woman and the couples on the other side.
Linda is the best boss ever, thought Austen while gratefully nodding.
She had clearly noticed the difficulties she was having, and unlike many other managers, she had not left her out to dry. Back in her apartment, Austen was now avidly sketching this woman, Isabella Peters, the most beautiful woman she's ever laid eyes on, while remembering the wonderful moments where she met her at the bar. Isabella Peters. Isabella, who had wanted a dry, dirty martini, a gin martini, unusually enough, with a twist of lemon. Isabella Peters, who had a voice that resembled silk even when she returned her drink 3 times because it wasn't cold enough, and, "This gin isn't right. I think it would be better with the Tanqueray." And finally, "It really is quite good this time, though I can't quite taste the olive brine. A dash more, please." She was demanding, knew what she wanted, and each complaint was met with an apology and a further attempt at the perfect Isabella Peters martini. For some reason, probably because Austen was already obsessed with her, Isabella Peters' demanding diva attitude wasn't a problem for Austen. Linda had thrown Austen a quizzical glance by the 3rd attempt at getting the drink right. In response, Austen just smiled and said, "The customer is always right, Linda," with a glint in her eye. Linda had just laughed. "So they are." Austen tried to make conversation with the glamorous new object of her obsession, but she didn't manage to get much apart from her name and that she was in town on business for a couple of weeks. She could see Isabella was reading Virginia Woolf's Orlando, which was one of Austen's favorite books.
"What do you think of it?" Austen asked.
Isabella just said, "I've just started. I prefer not to discuss what I'm reading before I've made my mind up about it." Her smooth alto voice sent quivers down Austen's spine. When picking up the check, Austen's hand had brushed against Isabella's, against the softest, warmest silken skin. Leaning forward to take her glass, she was absolutely intoxicated by the allure of her perfume and natural scent. Austen questioningly inspected the check. Isabella had tipped the usual 15% and an additional $30. Before she could ask, Isabella explained her reasoning. "I'm going to be in town for a couple of weeks. I hope you'll be around to make my cocktails how I like them. I am willing to pay for that." Isabella stood up and walked out before Austen could respond. Austen stood there watching her perfectly formed hips swing as she walked. Her overtly feminine high heels made the most enticing clicking sound. Austen sighed later in her bed. Her sketchbook was now filled with pictures of Isabella. Her figure, her lips, her gorgeous eyelashes. It only now dawned on her that she would be seeing her Isabella again, maybe even tomorrow. With that realization, Austen wrote, "Not so lousy," over the previous scribbles. She turned out the light and fumbled in her bedside drawer for her trusty vibrator. Slowly she unwound, touching the soft skin on her belly, her thighs, and between her legs while thinking of the gorgeous woman she had met that day. Chapter 2. Trouble in Paradise. Isabella had attended long meetings with marketing executives, managers, and business consultants all afternoon. They had all been speaking over one another. They were frankly behaving like zoo animals, and no one was getting any wiser or closer to solving the colossal controversy that had arisen in the last few days. It was thankfully still not in the news, but it wouldn't be long before the hounds would smell their way to a story. Besides, her company's sales had plummeted so badly in the last quarter that if she could manage a solution to the problems, a little publicity might not be a bad thing. Isabella shuddered when leaving the last meeting. She had vowed to herself that she would have a few hours each day where she didn't think about work. It had been difficult at first, but after this many years, it had become routine. Having the time off kept her sharp and fresh, and besides, her brain was always working on the problems in the background, if one was to believe any of the new neuroscience research that she occasionally came across when paging through a New Scientist magazine. In her hotel room, she undressed to her underwear, put some music on, and ran the bath. She felt her body start moving to the rhythm, and within a couple of minutes she was dancing her heart out. She bounced across the room. Occasionally she would glance at herself in the mirror and smile, remembering her days of competitive dancing in college. She had truly loved it, and after a few years of not dancing at all as a young business executive, she had decided that there shouldn't be another day where she didn't dance at least for one song. The bath in the luxury hotel bathroom was taking a while to fill, and Isabella fully enjoyed the prolonged workout. She only ever stayed in the very best hotels, and this one was no different. She stretched out her limbs and tried a few new steps she'd seen in a music video. Practice makes perfect, she told herself as she watched her hips and legs move in the mirror. After a few tries, she felt she was doing the move pretty well. Once the bath was full, she let the warm, bubbly water wash the day off her, although it was more difficult than usual today. Realizing that the next few weeks were going to be very difficult was not helpful. She felt ashamed that something like what had happened could happen under her nose for months without her noticing. Breathing in deeply and focusing on her breath, Isabella managed to quieten the thoughts. It was not the time to think about this. Focused and more relaxed, she looked at the antique clock with an intricate wood carving design. It read 8:30 p.m., a lot earlier than it'll be for the next few weeks, she thought with a sigh. Leaning over, she grabbed a couple of hotel brochures that had been left on the windowsill from her browsing the day before. She paged through various exercise classes and spa treatments, and she thought about her visit to the hotel bar the day before. There is definitely time for that after a relaxing facial and massage, she thought contentedly. The warmth of the bath enveloped her, and her body felt more and more relaxed. Playing gently with the bubbles and working up a lather on the loofah, she started washing herself thoroughly, dwelling when the loofah massaged sensitive parts of her body. Starting with the palms of her hands, she felt the gentle tickle send waves through her. She continued methodically until reaching her neck, where she again slowed it down and enjoyed the sensation. Occasionally she filled up the sponge with cold water and squeezing it at the nape of her neck, feeling the trickling icy liquid send quivers along her limbs. Reaching her breasts, she used her hands, washing around their contour. She had to laugh a little every time she did this, as she'd always remember her college girlfriend cupping them in the shower, raising her eyebrows and saying, "Definitely grapefruits." The power of puppy love, Isabella thought, squeezing more of the citrus-scented shower gel that she had used religiously since Ida had got her a bottle that Christmas, now 33 years ago. It was a short-lived but perfect romance. It naturally ended when Ida finished her exchange year at Duke. They had stayed in touch ever since. Isabella continued washing herself and relishing in the sensations of water, lather, and loofah, especially when reaching her inner thighs and buttocks. She felt aroused, slightly drowsy and relaxed, fully enjoying the moment. When she reached her lips, she dropped the loofah and started teasing herself, with just an index finger moving gently along the inner side of her labia, occasionally caressing her now excited clitoris. Slowly she worked toward touching the small mound under her finger more deliberately, feeling the pleasure run waves through her body. Eventually she could not control the waves of enjoyment, arching her back and allowing one hand to envelop and play with her breasts, and the other to continue dancing around her clitoris until her whole body was in a synchronized pleasure dome. Once she had climaxed, her body relaxed back into the bath, her breathing slowed down, her lips in a relaxed smile. She loved the simple joys of self-pleasure and bubble baths. She called down to the hotel spa to book herself a massage and a facial. Yes, it was late notice, she knew. Yes, she would pay extra if they had to get a therapist in specially, and headed to her wardrobe to choose her evening attire. Scanning through the items on the rail, she chose a pair of burgundy flats, as she desperately wanted to be out of heels the rest of the night. Isabella loved heels. She loved the power and the statement of them, particularly for business, but tonight she wanted to relax. So the burgundy flats were the shoe of choice. There were only 3 options in her wardrobe that would work with those shoes: a relaxed, baggy-style cream dress, a tight and short light teal Versace that she'd normally only consider wearing on a date, and a pair of jeans with a blouse. Isabella grabbed the baggy dress, started putting it on, then thought for a moment about how hard the barkeep had tried to keep her eyes off her the day before. The girl was quite cute. She had that androgynous look and youthful enthusiasm that just did things to Isabella. She certainly knew how to make drinks, and it had been a long time since Isabella had flirted with anyone. The thought of seeing Austin, as a name tag had read, try to keep her gaze away was an alluring one. Isabella had long grown tired of men lusting after her body, but she never failed to come to life when she watched an attractive woman lust after her body. She quickly threw the short teal dress on and felt it hugging her curves. On her way out, she grabbed her purse, throwing in a small makeup pouch just to do the basics after the spa. The massage had been lush and exactly what was needed, Isabella thought while perfecting her lipstick and shaking out her long golden blonde curls. She knew she was lucky with her hair. Once it was done, she could refresh it easily and keep it looking good for at least a couple of days. Her face looked very fresh after the treatment. Not bad for 54, she pondered as she headed to the hotel bar. Sitting in the same seat as the day before, Isabella crossed her legs, tidily lining up the menu, her current reading project, and her phone in front of her on the table. Scanning the room, she was pleased to note that the bar was significantly quieter than the day before. Ms. Austen, as Isabella had decided to call the sweet-looking young androgynous bartender in her mind, was working again today. Ms. Austen was looking significantly more relaxed and in her element as she scuttled around mixing drinks, chatting to customers, and showed off a beautiful smile ever so often. Isabella stretched, picked up her book, and put on a pair of black-rimmed reading glasses, opening the page, knowing that Ms. Austen was glancing her way ever so often. She did so slowly, deliberately, caressing the spine of the book with her fingers. While turning the pages, she noticed a figure standing nearby. Isabella stayed concentrated on the page and did not look up. In the corner of her eye, she watched the shadow shift its weight, clearly waiting for her to look up. Isabella decided she would not yet. "Excuse me," said a quiet voice. The figure had spoken. With a mild internal smile, Isabella held up an index finger indicating she would give the figure, which she was sure couldn't be anyone but Miss Austen, her attention shortly. After a few seconds, Isabella put her book down and looked at Austen over the rim of her glasses. Wearing a nicely fitting shirt and a pair of black pants and a small amount of makeup that perfectly accentuated her features, the barkeep was looking even better than she had yesterday. Her gray eyes are captivating, and those full lips, thought Isabella. "Good evening," said Isabella softly. "Good evening," Austen replied with a sweet smile. "What can I get for you today?" she continued. "Well, I am famished," said Isabella, looking Austen in the eye. "Can you recommend something to eat?" Hummed Austen with a smile. "Well, for a famished woman, we highly recommend one of our larger plates, possibly the steak or the poached salmon," she continued with a light tone. Isabella could feel Austen's eyes on her whenever she gazed away. She crossed and uncrossed her long, smooth, bare legs in the tight dress and watched as Austen's eyes were drawn straight to them. Raising her eyebrows slightly, she asked, "And for a vegetarian famishy?" Smiling a little wider, Austen said, "Well, for a vegetarian hunger-stricken woman, I'd recommend the following. A plate of olives and the Barcelonan tomatoes on bread to start, followed by a plate of the asparagus risotto." Austen seemed sure of the selection as she continued, "with a glass of crisp vermouth to wash it all down." "Well, that all sounds adequate," replied Isabella. "However, Austen, you should know I like my cocktails by now," she continued dryly. Austen smiled quizzically, clearly unfussed by Isabella's feigned annoyance. "The vermouth will complement your meal best, in my opinion, and there's always time for cocktails for dessert," she said in a matter-of-fact tone. "However, it would be my pleasure to serve you anything you like to drink this evening, beautiful Isabella," she continued sweetly. Isabella smiled to herself. Austen was playing games, too. Isabella had not expected that. Pretending not to note the compliment, she said, "Well then, how can I not accept such a recommendation?" I'll drink the vermouth with dinner and look forward to some excellent cocktails for dessert. She allowed the word dessert to linger on her tongue.
Will that be all for now?
Asked Austen gently. A large bottle of sparkling water as well, please, said Isabella, already picking her book up again.
Coming up,
Austen replied before walking away. Isabella kept reading, occasionally glancing at Austen, who seemed a lot more confident today than she had been the day before. This Austen was certainly a lot sexier than the fumbling girl who allowed herself to be harassed by inebriated customers. After a short while, Austen approached her table with a tray of drinks and starters. Isabella put the book down and looked up this time.
Here we are,
said Austen. Smiling, she placed the items on the table. The plates were small and beautifully presented as one would expect in a hotel of this caliber, and the fresh smell of tomatoes with a hint of garlic filled the air. Isabella felt her stomach growl. She hadn't eaten anything since breakfast and was honestly quite hungry. Thank you, she said, looking at the glistening olives. She picked one up and looked at Austen, who was smiling at her.
Is there anything else I could get you at all?
Austen said, with her eyes glued to Isabella's lips as she wrapped them around the olive delicately, making a perfect O shape. Isabella looked up at Austen while finishing her olive, gently licking and biting her lower lip. Anything? Isabella clarified, leaning her head to one side and looking Austen in the eye. Isabella felt rather pleased with herself as Austen's cheeks slowly started taking on a light shade of pink that quite became her.
Of course,
responded Austen, who seemed unable to meet Isabella's gaze. Well, I'll need a little more time to think about that, said Isabella while innocently picking up another olive.
Certainly,
answered Austen, as her cheeks took on a brighter shade of red while backing away from the table. Isabella felt a little thrill while nibbling her meal. It seemed clear now that Miss Austen, who was turning out to be slightly more intriguing than she'd initially thought, was indeed interested. Another waiter brought her main course, which she gratefully ate in silence. The main character in the book had fallen asleep and turned into a woman. Isabella found this plot twist interesting, considering the book was published in 1928, according to the cover page. No wonder that someone with such nonspecific androgynous features as Austen had found it a comforting read. The fluidity of gender roles was well executed. As Isabella was having that thought, Austen approached.
Excellent, said Austen, picking up the empty plates. You must have enjoyed your meal,
she continued, smiling at Isabella. Yes, the food was very nice, and I must admit you were right about the vermouth, said Isabella while inspecting Austen's figure more closely. Her eyes took in the straight hips and slight hint of breasts, but most interestingly was the muscular frame. Although slender, Austen had clearly defined muscles, especially visible around her shoulders and arms due to the light shirt.
Well, that's high praise,
said Austen, clearly pleased with the outcome.
What can I get you for dessert, then? She continued.
Oh, said Isabella, I like to try as many new cocktails as I can. It's kind of a hobby of mine. There are some, though, that seem more difficult to get a hold of than others.
Nothing is impossible here, said Austen. You name it, and I will make it for you,
she continued with a twinkle in her eye. Well, why don't you suggest an unusual cocktail you make well, said Isabella, all while imagining Austen's muscular hands around her waist. The vermouth had already gone to her head, and she was starting to have fun. Austen leaned in closer, so close that Isabella could smell her and feel her warmth. In a low voice, making sure no one else could hear, Austen said,
Well, there is one cocktail I specialize at, and I think it would suit you perfectly, seeing that you always wear the most exquisite lipstick.
Isabella knew she had her, but she played the game, saying innocently, Oh, what would that be?
Well,
continued Austen in a low whispering voice,
it's called a lesbian lipstick, and it is quite wonderful in my opinion.
Isabella kept her composure, pretending she had never heard of it before, determined not to acknowledge the compliments. One of those, then, she said in a matter-of-fact voice. Would you be able to provide some chocolate-covered strawberries to go with it? Isabella continued. Smiling, Austen nodded and left to bring the order. Isabella watched as handsome Miss Austen threw together the ingredients in the cocktail shaker, unable to take her eyes off the tanned forearms as she shook it over the ice. Then a thought crossed her mind. As Austen approached with the drink, she took her lipstick out of her purse with a small pocket mirror and started adjusting her lips. Once done, Isabella picked up a napkin and made a perfect lip impression, placing it on the table in front of her. Austen placed the drink and the strawberries on the table. It was clear that she had seen Isabella's little show and had been bemused by it. The light pink color on her cheeks was revealing of her internal feelings. She was devouring Isabella with her eyes, and Isabella relished the attention. Isabella picked up the drink, reminding herself not to be too critical, took a sip, and was genuinely surprised by the delicately balanced flavors. She nodded approvingly at Austen, letting a small murmur of pleasure slip her lips. "Glad you're enjoying it," said Austen, and lingered by the table. "You really read quite a lot for a day," she continued, looking at Isabella's bookmark. "Really?" responded Isabella between sips of cocktail. "I should really have finished it by now." "Wow," said Austen, seeming genuinely impressed. "You really are superhuman," she continued. "Superhuman?" repeated Isabella, raising her eyebrows. "What would make you say such a thing?" she asked. Austen was not prepared for the question, but it seemed she was determined to keep Isabella's interest. So while unable to prevent herself from blushing, she said, "I think you are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And not only that, but you have excellent taste," Austen added. "To complete the package, you clearly are highly intelligent if you can read at that speed." Normally women fell apart under Isabella's flirting. It was too easy. But not this one. No, this one was different. And Isabella realized she was enjoying it. Isabella sipped her drink, not responding at all to Austen's little speech. She could see the color on her cheeks deepen as she let a few more seconds pass. "I must apologize," said Austen. "That was completely out of line. I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your evening," she continued. As she was turning around, Isabella said, "Austen, come back once I've finished this cocktail. I'll probably want another before I head off." Austen looked back, slightly relieved, clearly hoping she hadn't overstepped as badly as she had thought. She nodded as she walked back to the bar. Isabella was taken aback by how much fun she was having. Remembering that she really was here to work, she decided to make haste as the time was approaching midnight, and she had meetings all day again tomorrow. She finished her drink and quickly waved Austen over. She knew she had to exit the game slightly more diplomatically if she wanted it to continue. Austen arrived at the table, clearly having composed herself from the embarrassing moment earlier. Smiling, she said, "Right, what can I get for you?" Isabella leaned back and said, "I think I need a conservative ending to my dining experience. How about one of those excellent martinis you made yesterday?" She was now smiling. "Yes, not a problem at all," said Austen while clearing the table. She seemed relieved as she walked away. "Oh, and Austen, can you please bring the check with you as well?" asked Isabella. From afar, Isabella could see that Austen was using the right gin, a great plus that she had remembered from the night before. Her thoughts drifted away from the bar, though, to her room, and how much she wanted to have the company of a woman, to feel another's warm skin against hers. It had been long since her last sexual encounter, and even longer since her last fling. Austen approached with the cocktail, awakening Isabella from her musings, and she placed it on the table in front of her alongside the check as requested. She inquired if there was anything else Isabella wanted and wished her a good night when Isabella declined any additional service. Isabella sipped the martini a little faster than would be normal for her. She felt sleep slowly creep over her, eyelids growing heavier. Quite inebriated, her focus shifted to fantasies of things she might like to do with good-looking, good-humored Austen. While finishing her drink, she put enough money to cover the check and a generous tip on the table. She flirted with the idea of leaving the napkin with the lip impression on it, but thought better of it. Instead, she let it drop to the ground. What a silly notion. Standing up to leave, She saw Austin walking towards the table to clean up and pick up the check. She didn't want to look at her. Instead, she kept her eyes on the door. She headed straight out without looking back. Chapter 3. A Stolen Kiss. Austin felt like she had made a total fool out of herself as she watched Isabella leave. Did I really say those things to her? She thought to herself. She recalled her various incredibly awkward attempts at compliments and flirtations. Austin thought she had a lot more game than that. Usually she had no problem talking, flirting, and being around women. Isabella was no regular woman, though. At times it seemed like she was flirting. Then she'd suddenly turn cold. Never mind, thought Austin as she picked up Isabella's check. Again, she had left a more than generous tip. As she watched her walk away, Austin couldn't be more confused. That didn't stop her admiring the amazing dress Isabella was wearing, however. A short figure-hugging light teal piece with a strappy halter necktop. Austin hadn't been able to take her eyes off it for much of the night. What a woman, thought Austin, and shook her head. As she left the table, she noticed the napkin Isabella had used to blot her lipstick on the floor. Leaning down, she picked it up and discreetly slipped it in her pocket. The rest of the shift went by swiftly, and in no time Austin was on her bike heading home. Madeline was still unwell, so she had agreed to cover her shift tomorrow, meaning that she was working every day this week. She hoped Isabella would be coming back tomorrow. At home, she decided to page through a couple of cocktail books she had bought when she had first started bartending. They were fairly comprehensive and could have something new she could offer Isabella to try. Austin made a list in her waitress's notebook with ingredients, settling on a selection of quizzical cocktails she could choose from depending on Isabella's mood. The jasmine or gin Ricky if she was in a bad mood. Alternatively, between the sheets or even climax if the mood was right. After a quick shower, Austin settled down with her journal wearing a baggy t-shirt and underwear. She started sketching. Mostly lips, perfect lips in brownish burgundy colors. Occasionally she glanced at the napkin with Isabella's lip mark on, now hanging on the pinboard on the side of the bed for inspiration. She decided she'd work on a hyper-realistic painting of those lips for her next exhibition, if she ever had one. Starting a fresh page, Austin sketched all of Isabella, her curves, the look in her eye, the way her body looked in that exquisite dress. Pleased with the sketch, Austin put the journal down. She was wide awake. She knew her mind was too busy to fall asleep like this. She settled on doing a breathing exercise for a few minutes, then a glass of wine and a book to settle down. Finally, as her eyes were getting heavy, she thought of Isabella's scent and how much she was hoping to see her tomorrow. Sleep settled over Austin, bringing light, happy dreams, which adorned her mind until the sun awoke her the next morning. Austin was excited all day, buzzing around working on her various projects. She had an energy she'd not felt for a long time and even started the painting of Isabella's lips, choosing the largest canvas she had available. Paris had texted to inform her that the pigeon, whom they'd named Dover, was doing well and recovering from the paint escapade. The veterinary clinic had decided that Dover was better off in a wildlife sanctuary than on the streets, and she would be going there later in the week. This made Austin happy, and she thanked her brother, suggesting dinner the following Wednesday, which he agreed to. Feeling more conscious of her looks today than usual, Austin put on some lacy black underwear to make herself feel good. A black figure-hugging turtleneck sweater, a pair of smart, skinny gray jeans, and she was ready for the day. Except looking in the mirror, she thought something was missing and decided to put on some makeup. For her lips, she chose a muted mauve color she rarely wore, and on her lids, she chose a bronze antique from her trusted Anastasia palette. While she generally avoided blush, she decided to use a very slight contour to accentuate her cheekbones. Looking at her face in the mirror, she was a little troubled. She barely looked like herself, more like a painting than a face. She shook her head at herself as she grabbed her bag. At work, Austin kept looking out for Isabella, who never seemed to show up. The shift was so quiet that she had time to read behind the bar as the place was completely deserted on occasion. Linda was mostly in the office, and Ron had gone to the kitchen as he was interested in becoming a chef and would sneak in some learning whenever he could.
She might not come today, thought Austen dejectedly, while paging through the cocktail recipes she had written down the night before. She thought she could practice them anyway and stuck her head into Linda's office asking, "Would you mind if I put some cocktail specials on the board?" Linda looked at her and asked, "What has brought on this initiative?" "Oh, nothing. I was just paging through some books and came across some drinks I'd not mixed often before," said Austen innocently. Linda smiled. "Okay, show me the recipes," she said, interested. Austen handed her the notebook, starting with the first page with the jasmine. Linda raised her eyebrows as she got to climax, then looked up at Austen. "We don't have to use them all," added Austen quickly. "Yeah, I don't see why not," said Linda pensively. "It might be good to add a couple of other old-timers, though," she continued. "Do you know the recipes for a grasshopper and a Jack Rose?" Austen nodded. She had read that old-time cocktails were making a comeback, so it might be fun to get more practice mixing them and offering customers something new. "Right," said Linda. "Make sure to have a note with the recipes behind the bar in case someone else has to make one. You have my blessing to pop them on the board," she smiled. Austen scurried away and started writing the new specials with brief descriptions on the board, feeling pleased with herself. She tried mixing a couple to see which mixers and liquors worked best for writing the descriptions for her colleagues. Time passed, and still no Isabella, although all the customers that came in the 2 hours that passed ordered a cocktail from the specials board once she'd pointed it out. The most popular so far proved to be the Jack Rose, the Grasshopper, and Climax. Austen kept watching the door. Was there to be no Isabella today? She thought with sadness. A couple of customers sat at the bar, business-type people. She served them some snacks and a few drinks. After a while, an elderly man entered the bar. He was rather distinguished. A lawyer or a judge, guessed Austen, as it was one of her games to pass time to guess customers' backstories, then find out the truth. He placed himself at the other end of the bar to the business people. Austen walked up and greeted him with her usual smile. He ordered a whiskey sour and a salad. He chatted to Austen cheerfully as he drank the cocktail and told her about his work as a district judge. Austen smiled as he revealed his profession, thinking she still had it. After a while he said, "Please don't think I'm being sleazy, sweet girl. And just to make sure you're not thinking that, I'll tell you now that I have been with my life partner for 40 years. You have the most fabulous face, and that makeup you've chosen today really does accentuate your features in a wonderful way." Austen blushed and smiled at the sweet old man. It was kind of him to pay her a compliment like that. As she was about to thank him, Isabella walked up to him and gestured to the chair next to him. "May I sit here?" she asked, pointing to the bar stool next to his. "And by the way, I think you're absolutely right about Miss Austen's features," she said with a wink. The old man and Isabella smiled a warm smile at one another. Austen now blushed to a shade of red she hadn't reached since high school. Thanking them both for the compliments, she brought the man another whiskey sour and asked Isabella for her order without looking at her. "I'll have the gin Ricky," Isabella said, looking at the new specials menu with a glint in her eye. While mixing Isabella's cocktail, Austen dared to glance at her as she was reading Orlando. As usual, she looked wonderful, but seemed more tense than before today with her black stilettos shaking on the bar stool, occasionally hitting the central bar. Austen also noticed she wasn't flipping the pages as fast as she had been yesterday. Austen served the drink at the bar. Isabella barely looked up. "Would you like something to eat?" asked Austen helpfully. "No, business dinner," replied Isabella, not looking up from her book. That explains why she took so long to get here today, and the way she's dressed, thought Austen. She may have had a business dinner the day before yesterday as well. Although Isabella always looked immaculate and sexy in business wear, Austen found herself missing the slightly more relaxed version, wearing flats and a figure-hugging dress, who even seemed to flirt a little. After a while, the old man paid his check, leaving Austen a sizable tip, which she was grateful for. As he left, he said, "Remember, young lady, the world is your oyster. You just have to take what you want." She shook his hand and thanked him, thinking he was incredibly sweet. She knew some of her friends would find his language anti-feminist, and maybe not be as pleased as she was about him speaking to her that way, but Austen really didn't mind. He really meant well.
though his words had made her think a very naughty thought, seeing that she currently considered Isabella as her oyster, and nothing would please her more than a chance to grab her and lick her. Austen felt the familiar blush flush to her cheeks as she walked away with the empty glass. Noticing that Isabella had nearly finished her drink, she walked up to her and reached for the empty glass, just as Isabella had reached for it too without looking up. Their hands touched. Isabella looked up surprised as Austen's hand was on hers. Austen let her hand linger on Isabella's soft, warm skin. Her heart was thumping in her chest. After a second, she moved her hand, saying, "I'm so sorry. I was only reaching for the empty glass."
"It's all right. Don't worry," said Isabella calmly. "What else would you recommend off the specials menu?" asked Isabella while looking straight at Austen for the first time that night.
"So far, the most popular drinks from the specials have been the Jack Rose, the Grasshopper, and Climax," responded Austen, having now recomposed herself.
"Climax," Isabella said in a whisper almost to herself. Shaking her head, she seemed to sink into deep thought.
"Will that be a climax, then?" asked Austen, puzzled at Isabella's sudden change in mood. Isabella looked up as if she had woken up from a deep sleep and looked Austen straight in the eye. She leaned over the bar, which was completely empty at this point, gesturing Austen closer. Austen leaned in, inhaling Isabella's intoxicating scent, unsure what was going on. Her face was only a few inches from Isabella's now. Isabella leaned in closer, her lips almost touching Austen's. Whispering, Isabella said, "Climax, I know from experience, is best served with a couple of warm fingers." Austen stayed close. She couldn't believe what her ears were registering. Isabella put her hand back on Austen's, caressing her index and middle finger, and continued, "Why don't you bring one of those to my room when you finish work tonight?" Isabella's lips were less than a centimeter away from Austen's, who felt rather frozen as a familiar feeling of desire spread up her nether region, tantalizing, almost painful. Without even realizing what was happening, Isabella had planted her soft, lush lips onto Austen's, whose body responded without her brain being involved whatsoever. Parting her lips, she could taste Isabella, sweet, warm, simply gorgeous. Isabella pulled away from the kiss and looked at Austen, who at that point was unable to do anything but nod. "Great," said Isabella, sliding significantly more money than she owed across the table. "You don't know that much," protested Austen, who'd finally got her voice back. "I might not, but this is the smallest note I have, and besides, room service usually costs a bit more," Isabella said with glistening eyes. Austen wondered how much Isabella had had to drink at this business dinner before showing up to the bar tonight. Was she competent? She seemed coherent enough, and had not had any trouble with her balance when she walked in. "She's an adult woman," thought Austen, reprimanding the bartender in her and deciding she could always walk away later if it didn't seem a good idea. "So will there be anything else now?" asked Austen. "No, thank you," responded Isabella. "It's the presidential suite at the top," she added as she walked away. Watching Isabella's exquisite hips swing in her high heels again, Austen was certain that it had been a considered invitation. Smiling to herself, she couldn't believe her luck. The rest of the shift was very quiet. The last thing Austen did was to mix Isabella's Climax before washing up the last few items. She rang it through the till and paid for it, and placed it on a tray ready to go when Linda walked in. "Oh, hey, boss. I didn't realize you were here this late," said Austen, greeting her. "Just some ordering and billing to do. Those new cocktails of yours are flying off the shelf already, so I thought we needed some stock of the less usual ingredients," responded Linda, smiling and looking questioningly at Austen's tray. "This," said Austen, feeling herself blush, "is a room service order." She found herself looking at the floor. "I see," said Linda. "Austen, I really like you. You really are one of the best bartenders that have walked through these doors," she continued. Austen felt very ashamed as she thought Linda was about to lecture her, maybe even fire her. "Have fun, kid," said Linda. "Please be careful, though. You could stand to lose your job and get really hurt here. I know, because I've been there before," she continued. Austen felt relieved at Linda's compassion, and nodded gratefully for the kind advice. Of course Linda was right. She always was. Looking up, she smiled at her boss and just said, "Thank you." "I do expect that cocktail is paid for," said Linda with a much lighter, teasing air. "Of course, boss," grinned Austin while gesturing at her receipt. Linda smiled back and walked away. Austin waited for her to be out of sight before leaving the bar. Chapter 4. Climax. Back in her room, Isabella couldn't believe what she had done. Scanning around the room, she made sure everything was neat, which only took a couple of minutes. Then she looked at herself, thinking she looked a mess, and in the same clothes and shoes since this morning. She quickly undressed and hung up the suit jacket, whilst throwing everything else in the laundry basket. Remembering her vow to herself, she put some music on and jumped in the shower. No time to wash my hair, she thought as she quickly washed the day off her body. Wrapped in a towel, she adjusted her makeup and started bouncing to the beat. She was quite excited and couldn't really sit still. As she was bouncing around, she thought she'd better put some clothes on, and she wasn't really sure when the hotel bar closed. Looking through her wardrobe, she settled on a set of La Perla in a dark blue color that she rarely got any use out of. The bra, mostly antiquated lace, left very little to the imagination. She moisturized her body lightly before putting on the lingerie, rubbing a small amount of lotion between her hands and across her curves. The longing for Austin's touch was mounting in her mind. Feeling herself becoming wet just at the thought, she couldn't wait any longer. Instead, she called reception, asking when the bar closes, and was informed that it was usually midnight most evenings, unless there were a lot of patrons there. It had been practically empty at 11:30, thought Isabella as she glanced at the clock. It was 5 past the hour already. Rushing to get dressed, she simply decided not to bother as Austin could show up at any time. She threw on a navy silk sleep gown, which was relatively modest for a sleep garment, covering her nearly to the knees and not showing a lot of cleavage. Pleased to have preserved some of whatever modesty she had left, she poured herself a small glass of bourbon and sank down on the sofa, enjoying the music as she watched the clock. When the dial approached midnight, Isabella thought Austin might not be coming after all. She felt somewhat disappointed at the prospect and decided she'd turn off the lights at past. Isabella closed her eyes and drifted in the beats. She had chosen a favorite album, Pure Heroine by Lorde. She loved her silky voice and the challenging lyrics. The production, before Isabella could finish that thought, there was a slight knock on the door. Alert, she stood up. Her heart jumped a beat as she heard Austin's voice call, "Room service." Walking to the door, Isabella opened it slightly. There, beautiful Austin was standing confidently, holding a tray with a cocktail on it in one hand. Meeting Isabella's eyes, she slowly raised 2 fingers. Isabella felt herself blush as she gently said, "Oh, come on in." She noted that Austin was wearing the same sweater and jeans she'd worn at the bar. "She blushes," said Austin teasingly as she put the cocktail down on a coffee table. Isabella laughed a little, and before she knew what had happened, Austin had swept her into her arms. Being held by those strong arms was just like she'd imagined. Kind of better, though, thought Isabella as Austin gently pressed her lips against hers. The contrast of the tight embrace and the soft kiss made Isabella's knees grow weak. She felt herself becoming wet very quickly. Her lips and tongue danced with Austin's in delicious synchronicity. Austin's arms caressed Isabella's body, lifting the nightgown to touch her buttocks. Her touch was soft, gently teasing Isabella. Austin adjusted what she was doing with incredible agility based on what Isabella was feeling. It was almost like telepathy, thought Isabella with the wind knocked out of her. She felt more turned on than she had in as long as she could remember. It wasn't like this was the first time she had invited a stranger back to her hotel room, but there was a real thrill to this one. The confidence with which Austin held her and touched her was the most erotic thing, and she felt her body melting at Austin's touch. "Someone is excited," said Austin softly as she gently ran her fingers across the wet silk between Isabella's legs. Isabella heard a loud moan escape her own lips as her clitoris leapt into life. Austin continued kissing her and said, "Maybe it's time to deliver what was ordered," gesturing towards the sofa. They started moving in that direction, and Austin's strong arm around Isabella's waist was just like she had fantasized the day before. Isabella felt a little surprised. It was more usual for her to be the sexually aggressive one, and Austin had completely turned the tables on her, and she realized she liked it. If her body's reactions were to be trusted, she really liked it. Austin sat on the sofa and pulled Isabella toward her, facing her, still standing. She pulled the nightdress up, fluidly guiding Isabella to slide it off. As she was extending the dress over her head, she felt Austin's lips on her panties, kissing her through the silk. She moaned slightly, arching her back while dropping the dress to the floor. Austin put each of her hands on one of Isabella's buttocks, caressing, squeezing, all while her lips kissed her through the silk. Isabella was in disbelief, but decided to just enjoy what Austin was doing, as she nearly climaxed right there and then. Austin seemed to stop and was looking up at her mouth still on her panties with Isabella's legs straddling her. "You're so fucking hot," said Austin, pulling Isabella towards her onto her knees. Isabella, now straddling Austin, shyly said, "So are you," as she kissed her. "That old man was right. You do have the most amazing features," continued Isabella as she caressed Austin's face. Austin grinned. "Do you really want to talk about old men now, Izzy?" she said teasingly. No one had called Isabella Izzy for a very long time. She felt herself pull away slightly. "Sorry, do you not like the nickname?" said Austin gently as she pulled her back towards her. Isabella felt herself calm down and let her lips fall onto Austin's and said, "It's okay, but I prefer Isabella." They found themselves in an enveloping, passionate kiss again. Isabella was aching with longing as she pressed her body against Austin's. "What you said at the bar gave me an idea," grinned Austin while moving her attention to Isabella's breasts, caressing them through the lacy bra. "What?" said Isabella tentatively. She started trying to undress Austin. Austin stopped her and looked her in the eye. "Well, you should have your cocktail," she said. Isabella looked puzzled, allowing Austin to continue her thought. "And I should give you my fingers while you do, just like you asked," she continued, smiling. Isabella blushed deeply, still unsure of how this plan of Austin's would unfold. She buried her face in Austin's neck, who held her tightly and caressed her, kissing her neck. Isabella could barely take the ache from her desire anymore. She looked at Austin and said, "Okay, we can try if that's what you really want." Her face was still bright crimson. Austin looked pleased with herself as she indicated she wanted Isabella to turn around. Isabella obliged, now straddling Austin and facing the room. She could feel Austin's eyes on her ass. Leaning forward, Austin grabbed the drink off the table and handed it to Isabella, who was looking slightly confused. "Right," said Austin, while starting to kiss the back of Isabella's neck, caressing her breasts and stomach. She slowly worked her way toward Isabella's panty line. "Austin, I'm going to spill this," said Isabella pleadingly. Feeling torn between the potential drink spillage and the arousal brought on by Austin's diabolical mind. "Drink faster, then," said Austin between kisses, now cupping her whole hand around the wet silk of Isabella's panties. Not seeing what else she could do, Isabella took a long sip of the drink between moans as Austin continued to touch her. She relaxed her weight onto Austin, whose kisses and caresses slowly melted any tension out of her body. She was now actually enjoying taking the occasional sip of the drink as Austin masterfully handled her body, caressing her neck, her breasts, and slowly but surely building up to pushing Isabella's wet panties to the side and inserting first one finger, then two inside of Isabella. Isabella moaned loudly and felt herself push back onto Austin's fingers, as though she wanted more and more of them. She craved to be filled by Austin. She needed to be fucked by her in that moment more than anything else in the world. Isabella felt Austin's thumb slippery against her throbbing clitoris while she felt the fingers inside of her slowly begin to fuck her. Isabella was now moaning loudly in pleasure as she slightly bit her lip. Together they moved in unison, and Isabella's moans became louder as their movements intensified. Isabella knew she needed more. She felt a primal need inside of her. "Please, I need more, harder," she gasped, and she immediately felt a response from Austin as another finger slid inside of her and Austin began to fuck her harder and faster, and Isabella felt her climax building with every movement Austin made. She felt Austin fucking her harder and deeper. Isabella stopped being able to think for a few seconds as her body quivered all over and her orgasm flooded through her. "Fuck." Austin smiled at Isabella and kissed her gently. "So it seems you do enjoy fingers with your climax," she asked teasingly. Isabella laughed. She felt herself blushing as she felt Austin's fingers slide out of her, and she turned herself round to straddle Austin facing her again. "What do you think?" she responded, having slightly composed herself. "I think you did," grinned Austin as she raised the fingers of her right hand, which had just been inside of Isabella, to her own full lips. Isabella felt her eyes widen as she watched Austin calmly insert her fingers into her own mouth and suck every trace of Isabella's orgasm from them. "You taste absolutely exquisite." Austin smiled smugly like the cat who got the cream, and against every will in her body, Isabella felt herself blushing. Why was she blushing? She was a confident, sexual woman. Isabella felt like a girl in her 20s again. No one had been able to make her this giddy in a very long time. She looked at Austin seriously and said, "And when are you going to undress, Miss Austin?" "It's actually Miss Adams," responded Austin with a smile. "And any time you want," she continued. "Well, now then," demanded Isabella, feigning seriousness while pulling Austin's turtleneck off. Austin complied, smiling at Isabella while she removed her sweater. Isabella started running her hands over Austin's smooth skin, caressing her gently. She unhooked her bra strap, revealing small but supple breasts, just how she usually liked them on other women, far smaller than her own. Isabella kissed Austin's nipples, feeling them become hard in her mouth as she gently sucked and scraped them with her teeth. She heard Austin give out a small moan. "That's a nice sound," thought Isabella as she continued. "You really are like porcelain," she said as she started kissing Austin's stomach and worked her way down to her jeans. Austin laughed a little, saying, "I hope not. That would make me very breakable." They both giggled at how silly that was. Isabella's long golden hair was trailing on Austin's stomach as she unbuttoned her jeans. She went on to pull off both the jeans and Austin's panties and threw them to the floor. Austin's body was hard and muscular, just as Isabella had hoped. Light brown pubic hair was neatly trimmed between her legs. Isabella realized she wanted so desperately to pleasure her. "Should we move to the bed?" suggested Isabella. She was moving her soft hands over Austin's incredibly smooth skin. Austin nodded. Isabella took her hand. Both stood up and started walking in the direction of the large bed on the other side of the room. Isabella pulled Austin towards her as their lips met again. The tension between them mounted further as Isabella continued leading Austin towards the bed. Austin suggested Isabella remove her lingerie, too. Isabella shook her head in response. "No, it's my turn to give to you, Ms. Climax Adams," said Isabella as she gently pushed Austin onto the bed. "Oh, so what are your plans for me?" asked Austin, amused as Isabella straddled her again. "You'll see," said Isabella as she kissed the sexy woman lying under her, deeply and passionately. Chapter 5. Isabella's Game. Austin felt incredibly conflicted on her way home. Normally, she really enjoyed the exercise of taking her bicycle, but today was different. She just wanted to curl up in bed with her notebook. She desperately needed to deconstruct her thoughts and make sense of the situation. Her night with Isabella had been magical in many ways. At the same time, though, Isabella's clear lack of insight into other people's lives had somewhat gotten to her. What had she meant by offering her taxi money? Austin hadn't been able to hide her anger at the suggestion. They had managed to leave the situation on good terms, with plans for Isabella to come to the bar for dinner the following day. But something about the situation had disturbed Austen's sensibilities. She was independent and proud, considering herself a hard-working person. Many a girlfriend had come and gone, and she was no stranger to casual commitments, even known to encourage these among her friends, as she felt human connections didn't have to be long-lasting to be meaningful and fun. She had never, however, been treated so coldly by anyone she'd felt such a strong connection with before. Finally at home, Austen wrapped herself in her coziest sweatshirt and a pair of really comfortable cotton joggers and plunked herself in bed with her notebook. She untangled her emotions with phrases and little sketches. The sex had been amazing in every way, and through their physical connection, Austen could see a caring and softer side of Isabella. She had seen such a relaxed version of Isabella that knew how to have fun. This she wanted to continue, not minding it being casual or short-lived, as she knew she just wanted more of Isabella. And obviously, Isabella in lingerie and nude had left a lasting impression in Austen's mind. Her body was so striking: long, lovely legs, a full round ass, a neat waist, and very large breasts comparative to the size of her body, that Austen knew she could bury herself in for hours. Drawing naked bodies tangled in each other, Austen also recalled the incredibly awkward ending of the evening. After an hour of vigorous and sweaty sex with more orgasms than she could count, Isabella had suggested it was bedtime for her. She had meetings in the morning. Austen had kissed her and started getting her things together. She hadn't presumed or wanted to stay over, as there was risk a colleague might see her leaving. Isabella had then continued with explaining to her that she only wanted casual sex without commitment, to which Austen had just nodded, as she hadn't given it any consideration herself, and wouldn't normally think to define anything after what she considered a first date. Dressed and ready to go, Austen had wanted to say her goodbyes when Isabella had grabbed a $50 bill and handed it to her. Looking at the cash in disbelief, Austen didn't take it. Isabella had just said that it was intended for a cab. The awkward squabble ensued, as Austen had been offended by the offer, and Isabella seemed not to understand or care to understand why that might be. After a few harsh words, Isabella relented, but Austen was still feeling shook up. She had explained to Isabella that she did not want any money from her, and that she could take care of herself. Besides, her bicycle was parked downstairs anyway. As Austen was leaving, Isabella seemed to have a change of attitude and quite apologetically hugged her and stroked her hair, thanking her for a lovely evening, giving her a soft kiss goodbye that filled Austen with warmth. Austen allowed the recollection of the kiss to soothe her and fill her with comfort. Though Isabella might not win any awards for emotional intelligence, she seemed to generally mean well and was honest about her intentions and feelings. Sighing, Austen looked across the room at the painting she had begun of Isabella's lips. These were lips she was so much more acquainted with now, their shape, softness, and beauty. She could kiss those lips for hours. With that thought, she fell asleep, feeling contented and calm. Her dreams were filled of abstract colors and shapes muddled with the feeling of Isabella, her smell, her touch. Austen woke up fully rested and full of creative energy. She couldn't wait to start working on her projects, now starting a new abstract series, just painting her feelings as she recollected them. While still dabbling on the commission of pebbles, which was finally coming along well, she continued working on the painting of Isabella's lips. Her day was full of work and creation. In the back of her mind, however, she was thinking about when she'd finally see Isabella again. Pebbles had come for a visit through the window, as she often did. Austen kept cat treats for her, and often provided the feline with refuge, as her retired opera singer owner often gave lessons upstairs, sometimes giving rise to sounds that Austen imagined could shatter glass, like in the cartoons. She loved Pebbles' visits, and the cat was wonderfully affectionate and inquisitive. Besides, having live inspiration for the portrait was always a bonus. It was to be presented at the party that Mrs. Burkoff was holding in 2 weeks for Pebbles' 5th birthday. It was likely to be an overzealous and lively affair, as all her landlady's parties often were. Austen and Paris were invited as usual, and she was saving a whole month's rent in exchange for the portrait. Austen thought about a quote she'd heard about Einstein's theory of relativity on her ride to work. Something about a minute seeming like an hour if you put your hand on a hot stove, and an hour seeming like a minute when sitting with a pretty girl. Though she had no intention of putting her hand on a stove, Austen did feel time passed faster when there was someone as wonderful as Isabella to spend time with. The bar was relatively quiet, with a few scattered customers that Austen was happy to take care of herself, having sent Ron to the kitchen to help the chefs. Each time the door opened, she found herself turning around eagerly, hoping to see Isabella walk in. But nothing. No Isabella all evening. Austen felt sad. She was concerned she had offended Isabella so much yesterday that she wasn't coming back. Should she go upstairs and check on her after her shift? Austen wished she'd asked for Isabella's number as the clock hit 11:30 with no sign of her. Was she unwell? Had something happened? Austen brushed away these thoughts. Isabella was probably just busy. Seemed like she had a lot going on at work from what Austen had gathered. On the plus side, the highlighted cocktails were really flying off the shelf. Linda had been right to order extra supplies. People really seemed interested in the history and details about them. Austen found herself explaining again and again where they had been popular, who had been known to drink them, that the gin Ricky was featured in The Great Gatsby, to the point where she felt she had a presentation ready for every customer. At 11:45, the bar phone rang. Austen answered, and hearing Isabella's voice gave her great relief. She told Austen that she had been caught in an emergency phone conference meeting all evening. "Have you eaten anything?" asked Austen with concern as she recalled how hungry Isabella had been a couple of days earlier. "Not since this morning. I was just going to order some room service. Shall I order you anything?" replied Isabella. Austen was surprised at her presumption, but pleased that she was invited to see her. "No, don't order room service," said Austen determinedly. "I'm pretty hungry too, and I know just the thing if you can wait half an hour," she continued. Isabella sighed and replied, "I can wait for a while, but I really don't want to go anywhere." "Of course. Do you happen to like cheese? I just want to check." "It is one of my guiltiest pleasures," Isabella responded, her voice rich and silky. "Perfect," said Austen, feeling gleeful. "I'll be there soon." Austen hung up the phone. She proceeded to order the best quattro formaggi pizza with a collection of forest and porcini mushrooms. Just the thing after a long day, she thought, and added a side of asparagus and potato skins to the order. The pizza place was only a 5-minute cycle away, so she'd head there once she'd closed up. Half an hour later, armed with takeout, Austen couldn't contain her excitement as she waited for the elevator to reach Isabella's floor. She just wanted to hold her and play with her. With those thoughts in her head, Austen could feel the arousal rising within her body. Planting a soft knock on the door when she finally reached it, and after what seemed like an eternity, Isabella's voice invited her in, stating it was unlocked. Austen pushed the door open. She couldn't see Isabella anywhere as she entered. "In the bathroom," Isabella's voice sang with a slight echo. Austen took her shoes off and placed the takeout on the coffee table, wondering whether she was expected to go find Isabella or to wait. The quandary was resolved by Isabella calling, "Are you coming?" Walking toward the voice, Austen slowly opened the bathroom door. Isabella was sitting on the edge of the tub in a robe, her long golden hair flowing almost to her hips, wavily, slightly frizzy, and adorable, thought Austen as she approached her. The room was only illuminated by candles scattered everywhere, and a scent of jasmine filled the room. "Hi there," said Austen, smiling. "Only the champagne and rose petals missing," she joked. "Well, hello," replied Isabella with a look of mischief on her face as she pulled up a bottle from behind her. Austen laughed. "I brought food," she said, gesturing towards the other room, unsure of what Isabella had in mind. Isabella looked pensive, then nodded determinedly. "Okay, we'll eat quickly and top up the bath with hot after," she said jovially, while popping the head off the champagne bottle and skipping lightly through to the main room. Austen sighed slightly and followed. She wished she could ever understand or anticipate what was going on in Isabella's head, but it was always a complete mystery. After a day like she had described, she should be completely exhausted, but was seemingly happy as ever. Was it all pretend, or did she have infinite, superhuman energy? Austen wondered as she followed Isabella to the other room where she had now placed herself on the sofa, sitting with her legs crossed, and pouring champagne into 2 flutes. "What have you brought us to feast on, Ms. Climax Adams?" asked Isabella teasingly while handing Austen a flute. Austen blushed slightly at the nickname but enjoyed it and responded, "Pizza and fries," as she sat on the sofa next to Isabella and reached for the bag, opening the various containers and handing Isabella a fork for the sides. As she did this, their hands touched, and Austen felt that electrical feeling of butterflies flying through her body again. Unable to control herself, she reached over and placed a kiss on Isabella's neck. Isabella leaned into the kiss and slowly turned until their lips met. Any remaining upset from the day before melted away as their lips and tongues played gently with one another for a few seconds. "I'm glad you came," said Isabella gently as she stuck her fork into a potato skin. "Me too," said Austen. They made their way through the meal, chatting occasionally and concentrating on what Isabella had described as the best pizza ever, which greatly pleased Austen. Asking a lot of questions, Austen took the opportunity to learn more about Isabella, as this was the most forthright she had been since they'd met. Isabella was a CEO for a clothing and lingerie brand, and recently there had been an issue with supply chains. She didn't say more, though this was the reason she was in town and in these grueling continual meetings. As the atmosphere seemed relaxed, Austen wanted to know about why Isabella had reacted so strongly to the nickname she'd called her the day before, but thought she better broach the topic gently. "So, may I ask you a question, Miss Peters?" approached Austen lightly. "You may, Miss Adams," responded Isabella teasingly, and with a light amusement in her voice she continued. "I, however, retain the right to refrain from answering." "Well, you see, Miss Peters," said Austen, continuing the same feigned Victorian air, "I was pondering what the story around the nickname Izzy is. If you would grace my curiosity," continued Austen, feeling quite happy about Isabella's light air and enjoying the joke. Isabella laughed, at first slightly, then more deeply, until tears started sprawling out of her eyes, messing up her mascara. She didn't seem to care as she uncontrollably continued laughing. Austen was happy to see her so amused, and couldn't help but join in as she found the laughter contagious. Finally, Isabella collected herself. "Well, it is not a story I care to tell often, however. Since you ask so politely, Miss Adams, I will quench your curiosity if you will fulfill 2 conditions." "Please, pray tell. I will do anything to still this need for knowledge," said Austen with incredible feigned drama, almost making herself laugh in the process. "You will let me have the last piece of pizza, and following that, you will finish the bottle of champagne with me in the bath. You will also give me all the sexual pleasure I desire," said Isabella seriously. "If you are happy to the terms of our gentle lady's agreement, I will proceed to tell you," she continued with a smile. "I solemnly swear on my lady's honor that I agree to the terms provided," said Austen, giving a determined nod. Isabella grabbed the last piece of pizza and started to tell her story. The joking language seemed to help her reveal her feelings and thoughts in a way she would have found difficult otherwise, Austen noted. "Once upon a time, there was a young woman. Let us name her Izzy," started Isabella once she'd finished her food. "She met a beautiful woman. Let us name her Sasha, and fell madly in love." Austen smiled at the book reference and nodded approvingly for Isabella to continue her story. Sasha was loving and caring. However, she seemed to have a problem whenever Izzy did things under her own steam, and would become upset and jealous easily, continued Isabella, now slightly nervous. Austen took her hand in hers and said, "Continue, my fair lady, for I cannot wait for our heroine's story to unfold." Izzy managed the situation as best she could, as she really cared for Sasha. However, the arguments became more frequent and louder with increasingly trivial causes, said Isabella, looking very solemn. Eventually, one day, Izzy came home to find Sasha in the embrace of another, and when she tried to discuss the situation with them after she had calmed her poor nerves, they simply stated that it was only a matter of time before Izzy betrayed them in that way, and so they saw no reason to apologize for their behavior. Isabella now had tears in her eyes. Austen pulled the crying Isabella close to her chest, where her head found a perfect fit in Austen's neck as she cried. She just accused me of cheating and lying. I realized after a few years that her behavior was bordering abusive. I didn't have many friends at the end of that relationship, and after she was so callous towards me, all I could do was call my mom and ask her to pick me up, which was incredibly humiliating. At 35, said Isabella between sobs. She was throwing things at my mother as we left, and I had to take her to court to get the remainder of my belongings and officially sell her half the condo we had bought together. Isabella collected herself slightly. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I just dumped all that on you, Isabella said, wiping her face clean with a tissue. Austen didn't really know how to react, as she had asked for the story, but it was a lot to take in. She presumed that Izzy had been the nickname the woman had called Isabella. Wanting to cheer Isabella up and lighten the mood, she decided to propose they carry on with the plan for the evening and pick up the little game that Isabella had seemed to enjoy so much. You need not be sorry for a thing, my lady, said Austen. Standing up, slightly bowing, she stretched out her hand towards Isabella and continued, Your bath awaits with those wonderful sparkles you enjoy. Isabella giggled and looked at Austen. You always know just what to say, don't you? Curse and a blessing, my lady. A curse and a blessing, replied Austen, while leading Isabella to the bathroom as she imagined a Victorian aristocrat might lead a lady into a ballroom. I never told you about the Izzy thing, though, said Isabella. No need, my lady. I presume Sasha used to call our heroine Izzy without even her appropriate title of lady attached, said Austen good-humoredly. Some are simply not raised to know their manners, treating a lady in such a way, she announced while shaking her head disapprovingly. Isabella went into another fit of laughter, clearly enjoying Austen's silliness. She adjusted the temperature of the bath and undressed Austen, planting kisses as she went, then instructed her to get in. Rummaging around in the bathroom cabinet for a while, Isabella emerged with a few items. She placed most of them on the windowsill within reach from the bath. I recall you requesting rose petals, said Isabella, as she opened a bag and started sprinkling the insides into the bath. To Austen's surprise, it was indeed flower petals, most of which seemed to be roses, and fresh at that. You can't be serious, laughed Austen. I was just joking. I never joke about champagne and roses in the bath, responded Isabella seriously, refilling Austen's flute and handing it to her. Austen felt herself relaxing in the bubbles and decided to see what Isabella held in store with all this. Are you joining me? No, said Isabella with that mischievous smile again. Not yet. From her stash of things in the window, Isabella grabbed what looked like a new loofah and a bottle of something. She dunked the sponge in the bath and poured some of the liquid on it, making it lathery. Taking her robe off, she revealed a gorgeous single piece of lingerie, fitting perfectly to her curves with intricate lace patterns across her stomach and a thong-style back. She then walked up to Austen and sat on the bath behind her, with a leg on either side, holding the lathered loofah, her hair touching Austen's face and shoulders as her body moved. Austen loved the scent of Isabella, especially her shampoo. Leaning back, she felt the soft lace on her neck. Isabella started washing her neck and shoulders. Do I smell that bad? Protested Austen jokingly. Don't be silly, said Isabella. I just felt like pampering you a little after I was such a jerk yesterday and didn't turn up for dinner today. Austen was grateful for the apology and decided not to mention it further. It was nice feeling Isabella's soft touch on her body and the slight scratchiness of the loofah. The shower gel she'd used smelled heavenly, though Austen couldn't quite place what it was. Isabella washed and massaged her neck and shoulders. It was honestly the most relaxed Austen had felt for a long time. She worked her way down to her breasts and started washing them and touching them gently, playing with her nipples slightly as she did, just a tease, which worked, as Austen could feel herself becoming more excited with every touch. You really have beautiful breasts, said Isabella as she busied herself with making Austen's nipples hard between her fingers. Austen gave a quiet moan. Almost a sigh, she turned her head slightly to be able to kiss Isabella's thigh. Isabella continued to caress Austen's breasts with one hand as she used her other hand to stroke Austin's neck and play with her hair and earlobe. Gently, Isabella would scratch along her neckline with a fingernail, which made Austin feel goosebumps as her body reacted to the touch. Wanting to turn around and taste her, Austin tried, but Isabella stopped her, saying, "I don't quite think I got a chance to finish with you yesterday, Miss Adams."
"What do you mean?"
Austin responded. "Well, I believe you should be teased, and teased thoroughly," replied Isabella with a sly smile.
"I see. And what have I done to deserve such pleasures?"
said Austin, happy to play along with whatever game Isabella was proposing. "Well, you're good-looking and naked in my tub. That's a good enough reason for me," said Isabella as she slid into the bath behind Austin. Their lips met as Isabella's legs wrapped around Austin's waist. The kisses were deep and passionate. Austin thought they were even more gratifying than the ones the day before, as she closed her eyes and allowed herself to fully melt into the moment with Isabella's limbs all around her. Isabella loosened her grip around Austin's waist and started running her finger across her stomach, gently further and further down until she could reach Austin's inner thighs. Her hands lingered there as she moved her lips and gently bit Austin's earlobe. The touch felt intoxicating to Austin. The mixture of gentle caresses mixed with an occasional, slightly sharper sensation made her feel gooey as she leaned into Isabella, allowing her to indulge her. It was rare for Austin to completely relax and let someone else guide her in this way, but she really enjoyed it. For some reason, it felt like nothing could go wrong, and she could just trust Isabella to know what would make her even more turned on, without having to say much at all. Slowly, Isabella inched her way along Austin's inner thighs, Austin's body moving lightly in the water to allow her touch to continue. Light moans, so quiet they could be sighs, escaped Austin's lips with greater frequency as Isabella parted her labia with her nimble fingers, gently feeling her way around her now soaking wet inner lips and clitoris. They kissed again as Isabella's hands found their way to parting her inner lips, now teasing her vagina with a finger and gently rubbing her clit with another. Austin's breath grew heavier, her sighs slightly louder as Isabella continued to tease her like this. Her body was preparing for orgasm as her lips played with Isabella's, who slowed down her touch slightly but continued kissing her. Austin felt her body relaxing, now thinking she knew the game Isabella was playing with her, and relaxed completely, slowing her breathing. As she expected, Isabella started teasing with her fingers again, this time paying more attention to her clitoris. Unable to remain relaxed, Austin's body, almost by its own volition, started moving with Isabella's fingers, rocking in the warm water. She heard herself making sounds she'd rarely made as she was a quiet lover normally. Again, just before reaching climax, Isabella slowed down her movements, becoming gentle caresses. They continued kissing passionately. Austin was really enjoying herself and could not wait for her climax now, as it was bound to be incredible. Isabella reached for something from the windowsill. "Are you a vibrator sort of girl?" Isabella asked, showing Austin the item in her hand. Austin looked at the rabbit vibrator Isabella was holding. It was an interesting color, a sort of muted mint green, and was moderately sized.
"I've been known to dabble,"
replied Austin, still slightly hung up on the color. She had to ask,
"Why the mint green color?"
and shifted her eyes from the vibrator to meet Isabella's gaze. "Oh, I've got another one if you don't like this one. Would a black, pink, or—" Isabella paused, as if she was trying to think of all the colors of vibrators she owned, and continued, "Or purple, or—"
No, that one is fine. Just curious why you picked it," interrupted Austin, laughing. "How many vibrators have you got, lady?" she continued teasingly.
"I'm not sure," responded Isabella with a furrow between her eyebrows. "I know I only brought a few with me. That's why I couldn't remember all the colors," she said while looking at Austin seriously. "I just thought it was cute."
"That one will be great if it's the one you want to play with," said Austin as she and Isabella relaxed back into the bath together, giggling. Their lips met again, and as they kissed, Austin could hear the buzzing of the vibrator, and before long she could feel it pulsating around her clitoris and her inner lips.
Slowly, Isabella inched it inside Austin and placed the ears on her clitoris. Austin gave a sharp exhale as Isabella increased the intensity of the vibration and started slowly fucking her with it. She was now moaning with every breath as their bodies moved together, feeling incredibly close to orgasm. Nearly screaming, Austin thought Isabella had finished her teasing, but she slowed down again. "Not yet," teased Isabella with a voice sweet as honey. "I don't know how much longer I can wait," moaned Austin. "Oh no, have I teased you too much?" said Isabella as she started kissing Austin's neck and running her hands over her breasts. Austin breathed deeply and let her hands rest on Isabella's thighs. "No such thing, though I'd definitely be teased a lot more if you let me taste you," tested Austin as she turned around to kiss Isabella. Isabella laughed at Austin's attempt at negotiation. "Seeing we're in the bath, how do you propose that's even possible?" she questioned. "You can put your legs here," said Austin, gesturing on the sides of the bath. "And you can put your hand here," said Austin, gesturing between her legs. "You went to 69 in the bath," laughed Isabella. "I suppose so, yes. Well, not quite. I don't think your head should go underwater," said Austin enthusiastically as she kissed her. "It's lucky for you this old gal is athletic," responded Isabella as she untangled herself from Austin to make an attempt at the proposed acrobatics. Austin was impressed with Isabella's physique. Under her relatively slender exterior, she actually was muscular and very flexible. She was easily able to get into the pose without any difficulty. Austin's hands found their way to Isabella's thighs and buttocks. Unclipping the hooks on Isabella's one piece and gently removing the garment, Austin had a fantastic view of her body. "Her breasts are incredible," she thought as she caressed Isabella. Austin felt her arousal rise as she watched the gorgeous woman move her body. Reaching up, Austin placed her lips around Isabella's clitoris and enjoyed her responsive moans, and Isabella continued to tease her with the vibrator under her fingers. Austin could hear Isabella moaning as she kissed her pussy deeply. Slowly they moved together. The taste of Isabella's desire was beautiful. All Austin wanted was more and more of it. She pushed her tongue deep inside Isabella, licking what she could from as deep in her as she could get. As the movements inside her own pussy became more intense, Austin couldn't hold on any more and exploded in one of the most intense orgasms of her life, surprised to hear herself scream as she did. Isabella continued fucking her with the vibrator, and it was as if her body had a life of its own. She had no control as she came again and again, completely engulfed by Isabella, her taste, her scent. After what she thought was a very long time, but was probably only a couple of minutes, Austin felt Isabella tense her body and press herself hard against Austin's face, clearly about to climax. Austin held her ass and hips tightly and pressed her face into her. I could happily suffocate for her pleasure. Austin felt Isabella's orgasm powerful through her body, and there was a sudden gush in her mouth. Austin licked eagerly, excited to taste Isabella's climax. Isabella fell gracefully into the bath once she climaxed. It took a minute for them to untangle and for Isabella to come around. Isabella sat between Austin's legs and turned her head to nuzzle into Austin's shoulder. That was amazing, said Austin once she'd caught her. Isabella was so used to being in charge sexually that it felt so freeing just to be able to let go with Austin. And just as a cherry on top, Austin was also extremely caring and generous, which only brought the best out in Isabella as she felt kinder and more generous toward others after she'd spent time with her. Just what the doctor ordered, thought Isabella as she put the finishing touches on her makeup for the day in her hotel suite. They were finally making some progress with business, which was good, although the team remained split on the best course of action. She was pleased to only have 2 meetings and could take some time to go shopping this afternoon. Austin had a day off for the first time in a week, which meant Isabella probably wouldn't be seeing her. Best this way, Isabella told herself in the mirror, as they had spent every night together for at least 5 days now. She trusted Austin not to get too attached. They had had that conversation, and she had made it quite clear where she stood. But she still felt there was a need to keep a little distance, as this was just a fling. A wonderful fling, she thought, smiling to herself. After the meetings, Isabella grabbed a cab to the shopping district to visit a few quaint boutiques she'd been to during past visits. She was also excited to visit the Agent Provocateur store. It was bound to have some gorgeous outfits. Walking along the small streets, she enjoyed peeking in the various scattered shops. A gray-blue fedora caught her eye. She imagined Austen's auburn locks peeking out under the rim and how wonderful her eyes would look in that color. If anything, Isabella loved to dress up her partners, and Austen was not going to be an exception. Her love for fashion shone through everything she did, and she always had ideas of what would look good on others. Inside the store, she greeted the saleswoman, who was a charming older lady in her 70s, asking to inspect the hat further. It was incredibly well made, and a perfect gift by Isabella's standards. The question of size came up and was slightly problematic, as she doubted Austen would know her own hat size. Isabella selected one that was slightly too large for her own head and agreed with the saleswoman that she could exchange it if it didn't fit. The box the hat came in was rather amazing, like something out of a movie, thought Isabella gleefully as she continued her walk. Finally, she had made it to Agent Provocateur and was elated as she entered. She hadn't bought any new lingerie for months, as she'd had no reason to, and felt like she totally deserved it after all this mess with work. And if there is one thing Isabella absolutely adored, it was expensive lingerie. The store smelled amazing, and the displays were simply stunning. A saleswoman greeted her warmly and asked if she could offer any assistance, to which Isabella nodded enthusiastically, walking around the shop, choosing various things she wanted to try, and told the shop assistant her size as she jumped from one display to another. In the fitting room, Isabella undressed and tried on the beautiful pieces. They were so amazingly well constructed. She especially loved the feel of the two sets she settled on, one in a cream color with details in magenta, which really popped against her tanned skin, and another in a plum color that she really enjoyed. She handed them to the salesperson and made her way toward the checkout counter when she noticed a marvelous see-through corset piece with an intricate garter belt and an adorable thong. She looked at her hat container and could see Austen wearing the outfit with the hat and some stockings and a pair of boots. She felt herself become aroused, but was interrupted by the sales associate. "Will that be everything for you?" the girl asked politely, having clearly noticed her interest in the garment. "Yes. No, do you have that one in a 34A and the garter belt in a small?" she questioned. "I'll check for you. Though forgive me for asking, ma'am, but is your size not a 32 double D?" replied the girl. "Yes, but this one wouldn't be for me. It's for a friend," said Isabella cautiously. "Of course," said the girl with a smile that let Isabella know she played for their team too. "Just a moment." "And a pair of stockings, please. Thin black nylon," added Isabella. The girl nodded and walked away to gather the pieces for her. She met her at the till a few minutes later and started ringing through her items. "Must be a good friend," said the girl. She clearly didn't think it through before she spoke and ended up blushing. Isabella found the blush adorable. She was so young, probably only 20. Deciding to be nice about her clumsy remark, Isabella just nodded. A very good friend, she found herself thinking with bags in hand. The remainder of Isabella's shopping trip was relaxing and fun. She picked up a little black dress she could wear to the bar and a new swimsuit as she really wanted to try the rooftop pool. Although knowing better, she did pick up a pair of shiny riding boots for Austen to go with the outfit. She knew she'd have some explaining to do, as the one present had turned into a bunch, because she had got completely caught up in the fantasy. She had refrained from buying the perfect 60s Twiggy dress because she thought that would definitely put her on Austen's bad side. But she did take down the details, though, just in case. Heading back to the hotel, she thought it was annoying that Austen already had plans for her night off. They could have met earlier than midnight for once, although she did remember the excitement of fooling around in the stockroom where they'd managed to sneak in yesterday when the bar was quiet. Isabella didn't want to spend the night alone in her hotel room. She felt like adventure, and with that she decided to go out for dinner. To her delight, there was a specialist vegan sushi restaurant only a couple of miles from the hotel that had very good reviews. They offered her a seat at the bar for 9 p.m., so she decided to head to the rooftop pool for a leisurely swim before getting ready to go out. The air was crisp with a crystal clear sky. The pool area was lit beautifully with lanterns and calming music playing. Isabella was surprised to find she was the only guest there. The water was a lot warmer than she expected as she swam back and forth, letting her mind wander. She saw images of Austin wearing the corset with stockings, the hat, and the shiny boots. She imagined them dancing together, maybe even swimming somewhere. Her imagination took on more exquisite colors and feelings. She remembered how unbothered Austin had been when Isabella tried to tease, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She thought about how easygoing she was any time Isabella had made a suggestion for something to try in bed, never saying no to anything, and only interjecting with ideas she thought would make the experience better, which they often did. She imagined Austin's naked body, under hers, over hers, completely entangled with hers. She couldn't stop hearing Austin's small moans that she had managed to turn into screams, although only a couple of times, and how beautiful it had been to watch her relax and let go completely. Isabella noted that 45 minutes had passed as she daydreamed. She had swum 50 laps and managed to keep her heart rate above 160 throughout, her smartwatch informed her. Not bad. Looks like I earned a little indulgence at the sushi place, she thought. She adjusted her makeup, putting on a daringly dark lipstick that she wanted to try with the new plum lingerie and the little black dress she'd bought. She paired it with a pair of shiny ankle boots with a block heel and set off for her adventure. The place was modern and trendy with excellent service, Isabella noted, as she was seated at the bar. She loved watching the sushi chefs work, and although they were working with only vegan ingredients, as the waitress had assured her, Isabella was not particularly strict about diets, nor did she boycott leather, though she had significantly reduced the amount she bought and had stopped buying fur completely. The honest truth was that Ida and her daughter Maria had come to stay with her for the summer, now 5 years ago, and they were both obsessed with vegetarian food. It had kind of stuck since then, although she still indulged in traditional sushi on her birthday, always alone. She had been impressed with how much vegetarian food had evolved in the years she'd been eating it. Even 5 years ago, an all-vegan sushi restaurant would have been unheard of. She ordered some edamame beans and a house platter of mixed fish, and a bottle of warm sake, and prepared to enjoy her feast. With a few pages left in Orlando and another book stuffed in her purse, she had plenty to keep her entertained. Reading fast, with her concentration fixed on the book, she rarely noticed people occasionally walking up to the bar around her to order drinks. A voice caught her attention, however, causing her to abandon her book and look in the direction it was coming from. "Is there any chance you can mix this cocktail called Climax? I have all the ingredients listed here," said a young boy in his 20s, auburn hair, gray eyes, chiseled cheekbones. He reminded her so much of Austin in his mannerisms and the way he looked. Perplexed, Isabella thought, "No, I must be imagining things," and checked how much she'd had of the sake. She tried to return to her book, but the boy's voice and negotiation with the bartender kept her attention. "Sir, I'll see what I can do, but it's not on our menu. Why don't you see if there's another cocktail you'd like?" said the bartender hopefully. "It's not for me, it's for my sister," replied the boy. "She's a bartender, and they've just added it to the menu at her place, but she's never had one made for her," he explained. No way, thought Isabella. This is insane. Was Austin here? Would she think she'd stalked her? She felt a panic rise in her throat as she scanned the room. An old panic she had not felt for many years. Austin was there. She was sitting a few tables away with her back to Isabella. This boy who looked so much like her must be her brother. Maybe Isabella could finish her meal quickly and sneak out unnoticed so she didn't look like a stalker. Nope, no chance of that. The figure who was definitely Austin was now walking to the bar. She would see her. Isabella breathed in deeply. She told herself not to be stupid. It's a popular restaurant close to the hotel and an obvious choice if one is looking for veggie food. She collected herself and turned her attention back to the book after sending Austin a text. "Hey, I didn't know you were going to be at the vegan sushi place tonight. I'm at the bar just in case you see me." Once at the bar, Austin ordered a margarita and thanked the bartender for putting up with her silly brother, as she called him. She picked up her phone and started looking around the room. Austin waved at Isabella and walked toward her. "Hi there," smiled Austin. Isabella felt the tension melt away. There wasn't going to be any drama, just a quick hello. Relieved, she exhaled and waved hello. Austen's brother, from what Isabella had gathered, joined them, and Austen introduced them.
"Paris, my baby brother," said Austen, gesturing at the young man. "Meet Isabella, a new friend," she continued, gesturing at Isabella.
Paris stretched out his hand to shake Isabella's and expressed how pleased he was to meet her with a glint in his eye that made his sister's teasing seem subtle. Had Austen told him about her? Isabella felt slightly perplexed. She didn't want to meet anyone's family, so she decided to change the topic. "Austen and Paris, really?" she asked with a slight smile.
"Our parents didn't have much imagination," said Austen with a sigh.
"Our older twin sisters are called Brooklyn and Chelsea," continued Paris.
"Just a family tradition now," completed Austen.
Isabella couldn't help but laugh. Her name was simply a variation of her great-grandmother's name. Such eccentricity was not part of her family traditions. "Why don't you join us?" Paris said.
"Oh, no, I wouldn't want to interrupt your evening," protested Isabella.
"You wouldn't be," said the siblings in unison.
They were so alike in their androgynous, full-lipped, gray-eyed beauty. "This is insane," thought Isabella. But at the same time, she was intrigued by the thought of spending the evening with Austen. Maybe learning more about her through her brother. What harm could it do, really? She thought as she decided to accept the offer. The conversation at the table was light and easygoing. The food was amazing, as it did an incredible job of emulating the texture and even the flavor of fish. Paris had been vegan for a few years because of his interest in animal welfare and enjoyed the occasional fushi, as the siblings had called it. Fushi was short for faux sushi. Isabella found herself highly amused by their stories, and laughed so much that her drink nearly went down the wrong way as Paris dramatically told the rescue of Dover the pigeon. "And the two of you named it Dover?" she said between laughing fits. "Well, of course, we are but our parents' children," replied Austen jokingly.
"I didn't know you painted," continued Isabella in a questioning tone. "How can you not know?" asked Paris, genuinely surprised. "She scribbles, paints, and draws on everything," he continued.
"Well, we haven't known each other that long," interjected Austen. Isabella blushed slightly. She knew practically nothing about Austen. She was intrigued, however, and wanted to know more.
"What other not-so-secret things do I not know about you?" she joked.
"May I make up a small list, sis?"
asked Paris, jokingly, pleading, clearly wanting to play the game and having noticed that Isabella wasn't just a friend, if he didn't already know.
"Don't embarrass me too much," replied Austen tentatively.
"Right. Where to begin?"
said Paris and cracked his knuckles dramatically.
"Let's start with an easy one. Did you know that my sister used to run track competitively?" he questioned.
Isabella shook her head, genuinely surprised. "No, I had no clue."
"Well, then you probably didn't know that she got an athletic scholarship to a fancy school because of all the running,"
continued Paris, clearly enjoying himself. Once again, Isabella shook her head. "Not a clue. What and where did she study?" she asked, interested.
"She studied English literature, Berkeley, and graduated with a 4.0 GPA, said Paris,
slightly boasting about his older sister's achievements and trying to talk her up a little. Isabella smiled. There was clearly a lot more to Miss Austen than met the eye. Austen blushed slightly.
"Maybe it's time to stop this game," she said shyly.
Both Isabella and Paris protested as the two of them were having fun, and Isabella was rather intrigued. Austen had never mentioned any of these things to her. She realized that she hadn't asked. Austen agreed to let them have 2 more Austen fun facts before it was time to turn to another topic.
"I really better make these count,"
said Paris as he rubbed his temples dramatically. "Yes, you really have to come up with the best ones you've got. Who knows when Miss Adams will let us have fun at her expense next," joked Isabella.
"Well, I bet you didn't know that Austen announced she was gay when she was 7 one morning, making our father choke on his breakfast, as he'd had no idea that she even knew what that meant."
"Not true," said Isabella, laughing.
"No, not quite. I just said that I wanted to marry a girl like Uncle Harold dated Uncle Benjamin," corrected Austen. "You weren't even born then," she scolded her brother jokingly. "And besides, Dad always chokes on his breakfast," she continued.
"Well, I just embellished slightly,"
said Paris with feigned defensiveness that made them all laugh.
"I better make my last one count,"
he said. now appearing to genuinely think about his next revelation. After a small interlude, he finally said, "I bet you didn't know that I have photos on my phone of Austin at Mardi Gras from 10 years ago that she left in the care of our parents." Paris grinned with satisfaction. "What? Really?" replied Isabella. "Yep. I'll let you see them for a small fee," said Paris. Austin turned a shade of crimson Isabella had not seen on her before. Isabella wasn't sure that it would be the right move to look, though she was curious. "I think I should be naming the price," said Austin, taking control of the situation. Isabella was excited to see these photos, so she nodded gladly. "Fair enough, sis. Fair enough," relented Paris. "In exchange for viewing those incredibly embarrassing photos," said Austin with a pause for drama, "I would like to choose what you read next." "Deal," said Isabella with genuine glee. The photos were quite fun to see. A younger Austin with a painted face wearing a white t-shirt and a respectable number of beads. The outline of her nipples was clear in the white t-shirt, and Isabella found it arousing. Austin was surrounded by friends in the photo and looked happy. Once they'd finished their dessert, Paris yawned visibly and was clearly making excuses to leave, which Isabella assumed was thoughtful. He seemed to have a genuinely warm relationship with his sister, and they seemed to have similar traits. Leaving the restaurant together, Paris headed in his own direction, leaving Isabella and Austin alone. "Well, what now, Miss Adams?" "Now I take you out for a cocktail," said Austin, and offered her arm to Isabella to take. They walked quietly along quaint streets, simply enjoying each other's company. Austin seemed to know where they were heading, and soon they were climbing down a set of stairs by a cliff. Isabella was happy she'd worn sensible shoes. Eventually, they made it to a small jazz bar with a pianist and a breathtaking view of the ocean. The air was cool, and they were lucky to find a seat by a window where they could enjoy the scenery. They talked over a couple of cocktails that were quite delicious, though Isabella started to feel the effect of the alcohol halfway through the second one and declined a third. She learned that Austin had dabbled in various industries since graduating college, but hadn't quite enjoyed any of them. She'd eventually quit and opted to work as a bartender to pay her bills while trying to make it as an artist. She was making slow progress, but seemed to not have a fully thought-through business plan. Isabella really wanted to see some of her work, but she didn't know how to ask. Instead, she told Austin about her current troubles at work. There was no reason for secrecy now that part of the agreed solution was writing an article about it on the website, aiming to be transparent with customers. Austin seemed genuinely shocked that one of the production managers had embezzled money and hired an illegal sweat workshop instead of an ethical factory in Thailand. She asked Isabella what their plan was and said, "So what will happen to the people who worked in the poor conditions?" Isabella had not thought about that. The plan had been to go back to their previous ethical factory that gave employees fair conditions. She didn't know what to say. They left the conversation there and enjoyed the music for a little while. "Do you want to come to my place tonight?" asked Austin, breaking the silence. "That sounds fun, but I do have to be up early." Isabella looked around Austin's studio apartment. There were canvases everywhere, and a lot of books tidily tucked away in shelves. A few plants were placed near the French windows, and various posters and collages were on the walls. "Can I see some of your art?" dared Isabella. "Of course. These here are works in progress, and I have some completed ones in the storage cupboard I could get out if you want." "If it's not too much trouble," said Isabella, having already started looking at the various pieces. The color choices were exquisite, especially in the abstract pieces, but the cat portrait was also nice. A large canvas had a pair of lips half painted on it. They were incredibly detailed where Austin had worked on the painting. The color reminded Isabella of a lipstick she wore. Austin came back with another bunch of canvases. Although the styles were somewhat mixed, a few common threads ran through the work. They had interesting features and good depth both in subject and colors. Her friends would pay thousands of dollars for this sort of thing, though she pondered whether they were paying for the art or the artist. Perhaps that was why Austin wasn't living well off this talent. Isabella sat down on the bed and admired more of Austin's work in sketchbooks and smaller canvases she had tucked away all over her tiny studio space. Suddenly something was outside the window and caught Isabella's attention. She looked in the direction but couldn't discern what it was before Austen opened the door. A large gray cat walked in and greeted Austen with a meow as it rubbed itself on her leg. Austen bent down and started scratching the cat behind the ears and on the chin, making gooey noises as she did. Isabella had not touched a cat in her life. She was generally frightened of all animals. She yelped when the cat jumped up on the bed and put itself in her lap. Austen, what do I do?" asked Isabella stiffly. "What do you mean?" said Austen and came to sit down next to her. "The creature, Austen. It's on me. Help," said Isabella pleadingly. "You can't be serious. No one can be afraid of pebbles," said Austen and scratched the cat's head. The cat started making an odd noise like a motor, and Isabella felt herself stiffen even more. "Is this some sort of pre-attack noise?" she asked Austen, who was busy petting the cat. Isabella realized how ridiculous she sounded, as though she knew nothing about cats, which she didn't. The cat had its eyes closed and was curled up in her lap. It was unlikely attacking was in its immediate future. Isabella giggled slightly at herself. "That's purring. It's what cats do to let you know they're enjoying your company. Why don't you try petting her a little?" said Austen. "She won't hurt you, I promise," she continued and put her arm around Isabella. Isabella put her head on Austen's shoulder and lifted a tentative finger and scratched the cat under the chin as she had seen Austen do earlier. Pebbles just purred some more and seemed perfectly comfortable. "I have some treats we could give her," suggested Austen. "Won't she accidentally bite?" jittered Isabella. "No, not at all. I'll show you how to do it. You just stay here and give her little scratches," said Austen, both perplexed and amused by how Isabella had reacted to the cat. Isabella felt herself relaxing slightly. She could maybe see why people kept cats as pets. Pebble's fur was very soft under her fingers, and she really was just looking for a warm place to sit. Feeding her treats had been fun, though Isabella was convinced they'd catch some disease, but she just followed what Austen was doing. Austen had questioned her about how she'd never petted a cat before. Isabella explained that she had no pets growing up, and no one else she knew did either. She had been to boarding schools for most of her education, and was often warned that animals carried disease, and so she'd avoided them even if the occasional stray had walked up to her. In response, Austen just shook her head, as if she really couldn't understand what growing up like that was like. Unlike her, their family always kept pets, and each of the children got at least one of their own as their parents believed it helped them learn responsibility. She had been given a kitten when she was 7. She'd named it Mittens, and had taken care of her until she went to college. Not knowing how long a cat lived, Isabella asked where Mittens was now. Austen had sighed and sadly said, "She's been gone for a few years now, but I still really miss her." Isabella felt clumsy asking such a question and put her arm around Austen. Pebbles made her way back to the windows and left a few minutes later, having finished her treats and been indulged in a lot more chin scratches. "You know, I think Pebbles really likes you," said Austen as she dimmed the lights and put a couple of candles on. They made love more calmly that night, more tenderly, somehow understanding each other even better than before, and both a little tired and tipsy. "Are you falling asleep?" asked Isabella while stroking Austen's hair as Austen lay naked between her legs. "Not yet. I was just taking a break to admire how sexy your vulva is," mumbled Austen as she started licking her again. Isabella giggled. "What about them?" "Shape, color, smell, everything," said Austen between licks. Her head had been between Isabella's legs for at least 20 minutes. There was generosity in lovemaking, and there was Austen. She seemed insatiable. Isabella kept stroking her hair as she felt her body react to the kisses. She erupted in an orgasm even more powerful than the one she'd had earlier, as Austen's tongue and lips embraced her clitoris. Austen seemed satisfied with her work and climbed to lie next to her. They embraced and talked some more. Isabella was aware she should be heading back to the hotel, but she was having such a nice time here in the candlelight. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Austen proclaimed that she had a better solution to Isabella's work troubles. Although Isabella put nothing beyond Austen, She could not imagine how she could come up with a better solution than a bunch of marketing and business executives, but agreed to hear her out. Isabella listened intently to Austin's ideas, and she really seemed to have solved a problem in a much more elegant manner. If Isabella could come up with the funds to secure that factory and train the previously maltreated staff to work to the standard they expected, that would be so much better for the company's reputation. Austin spoke passionately about sustainability and helping people, and how they should be visiting their factories themselves occasionally to see what the conditions were like for workers. Isabella had stopped listening. That all sounded great, but the money must come from somewhere. "This is really intriguing," she told Austin. "Have you got a paper and pen I could borrow?" Austin nodded and handed her a notepad and a pen. Isabella got to work immediately. She grabbed her iPad out of her purse and opened the budgeting documents that had been sent to her in conjunction with the scandal. She was, for the first time in years, breaking her rules about compartmentalizing work and personal time. Seeming to understand that Isabella was engaged in something important, Austin grabbed a book and read quietly next to her. The next time Isabella looked at Austin, she was sound asleep, and the time to her surprise was approaching 6 in the morning. She had unknowingly worked through the night, but managed to create 3 ideas for making the required budget for the project. She sent an email to her colleagues, detailing her work overnight and what she thought should be the new plan, proposing they change the meeting for 10 a.m. and try to pitch a new marketing strategy with a new plan in place, and also instructing the marketing and finance teams to consider which of her 3 solutions would work best. "This is why I am the boss," thought Isabella as she decided to rest her eyes just for 1 minute. She put her head close to Austin's and held her close. Austin snuggled in, not waking up from the touch. Chapter 7. Dance for Me. Austin woke up before her alarm rang. She didn't remember falling asleep, and to her surprise, there was an Isabella sleeping in her arms. Not sure whether to wake her, Austin checked the time. It was 7:30. She was unsure of when business people typically started their day, but decided to get up and have a shower, then make breakfast. She reasoned that no one has a meeting before 9, and the hotel was only a 10-minute taxi ride away. Breakfast in bed was what she offered any lady staying over. "That includes you, Pebbles," she said quietly to the cat when she noticed her sleeping near Isabella's feet. "You better not startle her awake, though," she warned. Settling on trendy buckwheat pancakes made with flax seeds, blueberries, and bananas, Austin made haste and assembled 2 beautiful stacks and made a fresh pot of coffee to go with it. Isabella hadn't made a move, so she decided to wake her. "Wake up, sleepyhead," she said, stroking her hair. Isabella moaned slightly in complaint. Opening her eyes, she seemed slightly disoriented. "Oh no, what time is it?" she yelped as she jumped awake. "Relax, it's only 8. I made breakfast," Austin replied. Isabella sighed in relief. "I have a lot to do, I'm sorry," she said, rummaging for her things. She was getting dressed when she noticed the 2 pancake stacks on the kitchen counter. Maybe a quick breakfast then?" she said, smiling. Austin beamed as she handed her the plate and a mug of coffee. Isabella read emails for the first 5 minutes, then beamed back. "You know, I think your plan might work," she said. "But I'm probably going to be really busy for another couple of weeks because of you," Isabella joked. They finished their breakfast, and Isabella set off for the hotel while Austin stayed at home to work on her art. Before she left, Isabella pointed at the napkin with her lipstick imprint hanging on the wall and said, "Is that?" "Yes," replied Austin before she could finish. "I couldn't let such beauty go to waste. I hope you don't mind." "No, not at all. Just a piece of trash to me," said Isabella, then pointed at the canvas with the lip painting and said with a raised eyebrow, "And is that?" Yes, said Austin and pushed her jokingly towards the door. "I thought you had a meeting or something else important to get to." She nudged as she kissed Isabella goodbye. Time seemed to pass fast after that morning. Austin and Isabella got into a rhythm of seeing each other on evenings. If Austin had the day off, Isabella would head over to her place for a cozy home-cooked meal and steamy after-dinner activities. Austin would head to Isabella's hotel suite after work. Usually Isabella came to the bar in the evening, and they would talk quietly when it was sparsely populated. More rarely, they would feel confident enough in their solitude that they dared to steal a kiss. And once Isabella dared a little more as she snuck behind the bar with Austen protesting that someone could walk in at any time. Isabella started inviting Austen to stay over on days she didn't have early morning meetings, and the mornings waking up next to her soon became Austen's favorite times of the week. Filtered light slowly waking her up and Isabella's body within reach of hers. Their bodies would find each other before either was quite awake, instinctively touching one another in ways that made Austen shiver. Most of those mornings they would stay in bed for an hour or two just relishing in feeling the other, slowly building up to intense sexual experiences that Austen valued. She felt incredibly close to Isabella at those times. As time passed, in her deepest private self, she knew that the feelings she was developing for Isabella were something more significant than was agreed upon. In a way, she felt that her feelings betrayed the agreement she had made with Isabella, but she could not help herself. She developed a longing for something ethereal, something lasting alongside the physical. Austen knew she would never broach this subject with Isabella. Her lover, her love now when she secretly dared to say so quietly in the recesses of her own mind, had been clear. In Austen's mind, she would lose all that she had with Isabella if she spoke of her feelings, and she would rather take anything given freely than be without the closeness of the person she knew she was coming to hold very dear. Instead, Austen focused her energy on work, on trying to somehow put her feelings into colors and shapes dancing on canvas, demonstrating her secrets for anyone to see, anyone who could read the language of the abstract. Her friends, when they visited, started making remarks on how different her art had become, most of them in awe. Even the ones who were seasoned artists themselves could not believe the change in her work. Never revealing what had caused the shift, Austen just said that she had met a muse. To her closest confidants, though, she was a little more forthcoming. Paris seemed to have gathered that his sister was love-struck, but had not been told the details of what she was sure would be a swift ending, as Isabella's work arrangements in the city were to be completed in a few days. It turned out that Austen's idea had kept Isabella in town for an additional 3 weeks, and had really made a difference to the company's strategy for their workers abroad, something Austen was proud to have helped accomplish, even if in a small way. Isabella had taken an interest in Austen's art, and was constantly sending her links to various schemes and suggestions for how to make it as an artist. Her ideas were rather commercial, wanting Austen to have a web presence and a profile on all social media platforms. Possibly of more interest to Austen was the competition Isabella had linked her. 1 year of living costs and 3 shows scheduled for the winner over that year where they kept the proceeds of any sold work, in addition to recognition and high esteem in the art community. Winners and runners-ups seemed to go on to have thriving careers as artists. Part of Austen wanted to try, another part was terrified. Besides, the deadline for applying was in 3 months. She would have to provide a full portfolio for the show they would be setting up for the competition. If chosen, Austen would need to have her pieces on display for judging in 6 months. Although she was working hard, this would be an insane schedule to try to adhere to with a full-time job. Today was an important day for Austen. It was Pebble's birthday party, and she, Paris, and Isabella were going to attend. Mrs. Burkoff had instructed that several of her friends were keen to see the portrait, and many of them may commission Austen to paint their pets and grandchildren. Austen hoped the portrait would be a success. Austen got dressed. She picked a pair of skinny gray jeans, black pumps, a washed-out navy blue V-neck t-shirt with a front pocket, and topped it with a gray blazer and the hat Isabella had gifted her. Austen really loved the hat. And although she had thought Isabella had been too generous with the giant stack of gifts, the hat was special. Almost part of her identity now. She rarely went to social occasions without it. The missing piece to complete her laid-back, boyish, shabby, chic style of dressing. Isabella had delighted in how Austen looked in it, and how much she had enjoyed the gift. It had fit perfectly, and the two of them had great times with their Victorian-style talking game, with Austen taking her hat off and bowing whenever Isabella walked into a room. Life is good, thought Austen as she made the final touches to the wrapping of the painting. She opened a bottle of red wine to allow it to air as she waited for Paris and Isabella to arrive, pouring a glass for herself. Pebbles joined her. As she could hear people starting to arrive upstairs already, she would most likely stay in Austin's room and comfortably avoid the crowd the rest of the evening. Paris arrived first with a wicker basket filled with treats and toys for the birthday girl. Austin gently broached the topic of Isabella with him and suggested he shouldn't say too much. Being Paris, he insisted on knowing what was going on, and Austin could not hide her feelings from her baby brother. They held her close and comforted her. Isabella arrived soon after in what was a terrific mood. She had been shopping again and walked in with an insanely large bag containing what looked like the fluffiest peach-colored cat bed in the universe. She was wearing a gorgeous white cocktail dress, short with a lacy chest and an open back. Heels so high she nearly stood as tall as Austin, which was an achievement seeing that Isabella was only 5 feet and 3 inches. She walked up to Austin and surprised her with a kiss. Austin melted into the familiar warm feeling of Isabella and was immediately happy to be with her, forgetting her earlier thoughts. They had some wine and a conversation that led to Isabella being the subject of a similar game to the one they'd played at the vegan sushi place. Instead, however, since there was no one to know her secrets, she would reveal something, and Paris and Austin had to guess the details. Austin enjoyed finding out more about Isabella, such as learning about her first girlfriend, the exchange student from Duke that she still kept in touch with. Other fascinating Isabella facts included her Venezuelan heritage, that she spoke Spanish and French fluently, and that she had been a competitive dancer since the age of 12 all the way to starting graduate school. Apparently, she had even been featured in some music videos, the details of which could not be pried out of her. "Cocktails?" asked Austin with a glint in her eye. "Dearest, no matter how many of those wonderful elixirs you make me, this is one secret I will take to the grave," jested Isabella. "Besides, it is time to head upstairs to celebrate, Miss Pebbles." "Fine, fine," sighed Austin with ungenuine resignation. Paris picked Pebbles up and held her close as she purred. He leaned over to Isabella and whispered, "This isn't over." They all nearly collapsed in laughter before getting the gifts together to head out the door. "You've left the fluffy castle," called Austin, and pointed to the bag with the giant cat bed. "Oh, that's not the gift for upstairs. That's for down here so Pebbles can be comfortable when she visits," said Isabella. "This is for upstairs," she continued, pointing to a small bag placed in her purse. Austin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Pebbles was perfectly comfortable visiting her as it was. Isabella seemed so happy with her gift that Austin decided not to protest. Worst-case scenario, she could take it to Mrs. Burkhoff's in a few weeks. Upstairs, the atmosphere was light. People of all ages were chatting, eating appetizers, and drinking Prosecco. Pebbles, as expected, was not enamored by the company or the attention, but the guests seemed pleased enough to see her for a few minutes before she swiftly escaped out the window onto the fire escape to go back to Austin's. The portrait was a hit, receiving more compliments and business inquiries than she could count, with requests for anything from pet portraits to paintings of people's homes, gardens, and the oddest, a life-sized portrait of Freddie Mercury at Wembley Arena. When she asked the elderly gentleman who had asked for it why he wanted the painting, he just started singing "Love of My Life." As always at Mrs. Burkhoff's events, as the man started singing, someone else took to the grand piano and started accompanying him, and the whole thing evolved into a sing-along where occasionally someone would make a rather impressive solo effort. Austin's company stayed out of the singing, but chatted among themselves and a few other attendees who preferred to listen rather than be involved. Mrs. Burkhoff had been delighted with Paris's gift and pinched his cheeks as she thanked him. When receiving Isabella's, she nearly cried. Austin was rather impressed herself with how considerate it had been. A beautiful collar with a quick-release clasp in a dark teal-green color. Pebbles' name was embroidered in silver on the front with some gemstone details. A small metal pendant hung off it with Mrs. Burkhoff's address on the front, and both Mrs. Burkhoff's and Austin's telephone numbers engraved. These were also engraved into the inside of it. When asked how Isabella had got Mrs. Burkhoff's number, she said she'd seen the faded writing on Pebbles' current collar and decided maybe it was time for a new one that was easier to read, seeing how precious Pebbles is to everyone. Later that night, Mrs. Burkhoff had taken Austin aside and said, "You better hang on to that one.
She's pretty, smart, and nice. That is what we call a jackpot."
Austen had laughed her landlady off and directed the conversation to how Mrs. Burkhoff had decided that the late Mr. Burkhoff was the one for her. The strategy worked well as she spent 20 minutes hearing the familiar story of how he had been the most musical man, which was true, seeing he directed multiple world-class orchestras, and how he would not leave for the States without her, even if it meant waiting for her to finish her studies in Paris. As the party started to wind down, Austen, Paris, and Isabella made their way back to Austen's flat and finished the bottle of red. Austen mixed a set of margaritas with a jalapeno-infused tequila that Isabella delighted in. Paris bid his farewells gloomily, stating he would be in hiding to study for finals for the next few weeks. Austen and Isabella, although already quite tired, decided to have another round of margaritas. They migrated to the bed, where they found Pebbles asleep in her new bed inside the giant paper bag. Isabella surprised even herself as she started taking photos and oohing and awing about how cute the gray fluff ball was. Collapsing into each other's arms, Austen started prying a little more into Isabella's dancing history. Isabella just laughed while busying herself with unbuttoning Austen's jeans. She teased her relentlessly as only Isabella knew how to do, and eventually, as Austen found herself more and more turned on, she leaned in and kissed Isabella, saying, "Would you dance for me?" "That sounds fun," replied Isabella, kissing her back and fucking her with her fingers. "What do you have in mind?"
"Lady Izzy dressed as a burlesque dancer, maybe with some fun props. I am the handsome customer at her regular gig," mumbled Austen between kisses.
Isabella giggled. "You have it all worked out, then," she said as her right hand teased at Austen's crotch.
"Yep,"
panted Austen, once she was able to speak. "Okay, I'll do it, but on 2 conditions," said Isabella with a mischievous look.
"Always these conditions with you. What is it now?" joked Austen, still pleased that she'd managed to get Isabella to agree.
"I think we should do it on the roof by the pool at the hotel," said Isabella.
"Are you sure? Isn't that too risky?" asked Austen tentatively.
"No, I've been going nearly every day and there's never anyone there. Come on, it'll be fun," she beamed.
"If you say so, but we really have to be careful. I don't want to lose my job," said Austen. She had to admit that she was turned on by the idea. "How about this other condition, then?"
"You are to wear the full outfit I got you, plus a dress of my choosing," smiled Isabella.
Austen raised her eyebrows. She rolled on top of Isabella and kissed her deeply. "I see what you're doing, but I'll let it slide this once," she said as she went on to undress her slowly. Guiding Isabella's naked body onto her front on her knees on the mattress with her face in the pillow,
Austen began kissing her ass and caressing it with her hands. Austen enjoyed the view of Isabella like this. She had a stunning body that looked great in all kinds of positions. This was certainly one of them. The full round globes of her ass, the glistening wetness of her pussy just visible, her long curly blonde hair splayed out across the pillow. Austen kissed and nibbled at the globes of Isabella's ass, feeling Isabella moving, parting her legs more and moaning. She knew what Isabella wanted, but she enjoyed teasing her. It wasn't long before she could barely resist herself, and her mouth and tongue made its way to the crack of Isabella's ass, and she ran her tongue in a long, slow stroke all the way up, tasting her wetness and teasing her asshole as she did. Isabella moaned loudly. Austen buried her face between Isabella's cheeks and went to work on pleasuring her with her mouth, her skilled tongue working on the soaking wetness of Isabella's pussy and then moving up to her anus. Her tongue teased lightly, running around Isabella's anus, and she saw goose flesh run across Isabella's ass cheeks in response. Austen had been with women before who didn't want her to touch her there, and although she respected their choice completely, she loved that Isabella was so open to everything and anything Austen wanted to do to her. Isabella had a trusting innocence to her that she had given to Austen from the start, and Austen enjoyed it so much. She licked at Isabella's anus in long, slow strokes and felt it relaxing under her mouth. She loved how sensitive Isabella was there, and she loved using her mouth to please her. Isabella whimpered and then moaned so loudly as Austen pushed her tongue inside her anus. The connection between them felt electric. Austen could feel how close Isabella was to orgasm. Austen enjoyed how well she knew Isabella's body, how she could make her climax in a minute if she wanted or just play with her, keeping her on the edge, wanting more. Austen removed her tongue and watched as Isabella quivered with need in front of her. "Be patient. I'll give you your orgasm when I am ready." Austen loved being able to control Isabella's orgasms. She loved how responsive Isabella's body was to her. Austen ran her right hand up and down Isabella's wetness, coating it in her juices. Isabella gasped and moaned at the touch, and her ass moved back as though her body was begging for her. "Please," she gasped. "Please fuck me." Austen didn't need asking twice as her fingers pushed inside Isabella. She was hot, wet, and her body welcomed Austen's fingers. Austen curled her fingers downwards to stimulate Isabella's G-spot, and she felt Isabella's body instantly respond. Her moans became deeper as Austen moved her fingers firmly in and out. "Please, please let me come." Isabella's voice was coming in breathy gasps. "Soon, baby, soon. I want something a little more from you first." Austen knew what she wanted, and she sensed it would be achievable in this moment. She already had 4 fingers in Isabella. She tucked her thumb in and started working her whole hand inside. Isabella was so excited and her body was so open to Austen. Her moans were deeper and deeper, and Austen knew she was enjoying the feeling as Austen gave her more than she ever had before. The process was slow and deliberate, firm yet gentle. Austen felt and watched every reaction from Isabella as she worked deeper and deeper into her, until she curled her fingers around inside and only her wrist was visible outside. Austen moved slowly and carefully deep inside Isabella. She knew how intense fisting could be, and she didn't know if Isabella had done it before. Isabella was quieter, as though in a trance. Austen reached around with the fingers of her left hand to slide against Isabella's clitoris, and it was only seconds later she felt Isabella tightening around her hand, and her whole body began to quiver as the huge wave of her climax began to shudder through her. Isabella let out a scream as her orgasm came, and finally, with her body shaking, she collapsed to the mattress. Austen held her close and kissed her hair softly as she very tenderly pulled out of her completely. Austen pulled her close and held her. Neither of them said anything for a while. They spent the rest of the evening close, kissing, touching. Austen was so gentle with her. Austen couldn't help but think that in 3 days this wouldn't be part of her life anymore, as she kissed Isabella's forehead gently, hugging her, burying her face in her hair. Austen inhaled Isabella's scent deeply in as she fell asleep. Chapter 8. Cabaret Finale. Work had wound down completely for Isabella's last couple of days in town, and she was mostly just replying to emails and relaxing. It suited her perfectly as she had become incredibly engrossed in her cabaret dancing project. Somehow it reminded her of the stage rehearsals and costume fittings of her younger days, and she had not spared any effort. She had obsessively watched popular cabaret and burlesque performances until she had an idea of her own choreography. She enjoyed the aesthetic and how the performers carried themselves, finding herself wondering why she had never been to a show. She watched all movies with a cabaret theme that she had time to see and found a vintage dress shop to perfect her outfit. She felt something similar to Liza Minnelli's costume in her performance of Mine Her would be darling, and to her surprise, the store had a very similar dress she immediately bought. She had opted for a different headdress as she felt that something with big fluffy feathers would entertain Austen more than a hat, and with it she had grabbed a cane and a large fluffy fan at a fancy dress shop. Isabella collapsed in a heap laughing as she was considering her song choices. She played with the idea of dancing to My Heart Belongs to Daddy. However, realizing that she could never do it with a straight face, she opted out of Marilyn and instead created a playlist containing the following tracks: April in Paris by Billie Holiday, Don't Rain on My Parade by Barbra Streisand, I'm a Bad, Bad Girl by Esther Phillips, and Fever by Peggy Lee. She tested her list at the pool as the hotel provided a Bluetooth speaker for customers to use. The sound quality was great. She felt ready for the fun to come the night before the big day. Austin was heading up after work and staying with her the whole next day. They planned to watch old movies, eat takeout, have fantastic sex, and head to the roof around 10 p.m. Isabella had packed most of her belongings, only leaving what she needed for the remaining 32 or so hours of her stay. She didn't want packing to steal any of the time she had left with Austin. For a moment, Isabella had found herself lost in thought. Was she never going to see Austin again after this? She had never felt this niggling doubt before the ending of any relationship before. She walked up to the mirror and, looking herself in the eye, she said out loud, "Isabella Peters does not do relationships," repeating the phrase 3 times like a mantra. Then, with more conviction, said, "This was fun while it lasted, but it ends tomorrow." She ordered Chinese takeout, enough to feed a small army rather than 2 people. She felt hungry following all the exercise and wanted to try all the weird and wonderful dumplings, buns, and stir-fries offered by the specialist vegetarian Chinese restaurant. This city really has quite a lot to offer between the shopping and the food, she thought as she clicked her order through. Instead of ordering champagne at room service, she had opted to pick up 2 of her favorite bottles from a local wine shop. She had a quick shower and put on some music, waiting for food and Austin to arrive. At 11:45, she received a message from Austin. "Hi, Isabella. So sorry, but I'm feeling unwell. Heading home now. I'll be over tomorrow afternoon instead." Isabella felt her heart sink a little, unsure of how to respond. In the end, she settled for, "Is there anything I can do to help? I've ordered food and can provide massages. Therapeutic or sensual, as would help heal you best." She added a hug emoji and a smiling one at the end. The answer came 15 minutes later. "I really am adamant that I must decline this kindness, though I wish to make Lady Izzy aware of my appreciation for her offers to care for a poor girl in her sickbed. It will not be forgotten." Isabella sighed. She felt quite sad as she sent a "feel better soon" message. She had no idea what to do with the masses of Chinese food she had ordered. Dressed in pajamas, she put on one of the films Austin had suggested for their movie night, an old one called The Apartment. The film was quite amusing, although having lost her appetite a little, she ate some food and couldn't help but to miss Austin. This was the first night without her for nearly a month. For the first time in nearly 20 years, Isabella Peters felt a twinge of sadness at the thought of sleeping alone. Dreaming odd dreams, rest escaped her, she tossed and turned. Eventually morning came around. Isabella was no stranger to sleepless nights. She just got up and jumped into her morning routine, breakfast, yoga, emails. No word from Austin by noon. Although she didn't want to disturb Austin, Isabella had an uneasy feeling. This was not like Austin. Was she upset? Why wouldn't she say something if she was? A message came through at 2 p.m. "Heading over now. Be there soon." Austin seemed her normal self and apologized for canceling the night before. They watched a couple of films, enjoyed a variety of salty snacks, and took regular breaks for fucking each other's brains out. It was exactly the afternoon Isabella had hoped for, although at the back of her mind was a sense of unease. Austin suggested they take a walk and have dinner at a local restaurant she liked. Isabella was happy to oblige, and soon they found themselves sipping South Asian-themed cocktails with exotic ingredients such as galangal, lemongrass, and palm sugar while waiting for their meal. "I finally picked what you should read next," said Austin with a smile. "Oh, really? Tell me," replied Isabella. "They're back in the room. I couldn't make up my mind between 2 books, so I brought you both." "Pretty sure that wasn't in the agreement," protested Isabella with a grin. "Will you read both?" asked Austin seriously. "Of course I will." "Promise?" Austin's eyes glazed over. She seemed to blink away a few tears. "Of course I promise," responded Isabella, putting her hand gently on Austin's arm. "Is everything okay, Austin?" Yes, I just got something in my eye. I'll just go fix it," replied Austin and left the table. Isabella did not believe her but didn't know what to do. She wondered what the matter was. Deep in her heart she knew, but she couldn't bring herself to consider an alternative. Picking up her pocket mirror, she said her mantra 3 times more. When Austin came back, she held her hand. They chatted a little more over the meal, and Isabella brought up the subject of their rooftop activities. This seemed to cheer Austin up. She told her about her music choices, how she'd picked her outfit, and the story of how she'd decided against Marilyn. Austin seemed much perkier by the time they finished eating, full of excitement to see Isabella's dance. Back at the hotel, they got ready in separate rooms. Isabella took the bathroom as she didn't want Austin to see her. She wanted them to meet on the roof. Austin texted her when she had found a seat in one of the sun chairs by the pool. Excited, she wrapped herself in a trench coat and headed out. She saw Austin looking wonderful in hat, dress, and boots, and waved. A minute later, she had linked her phone to the speaker and put her accessories on the table in front of Austin. With the music on, Isabella went through her routine, strutting around the roof, leaning on tables and railings, and as the final 2 songs came on, her dance became more intimate, closer to Austin, who had cheered and appeared delighted throughout. As Peggy's words surrounded them, Isabella straddled Austin, kissed her, pulled away. She teased and flirted, and felt herself become soaking wet as Austin watched, touched gently, stole a kiss. When the song finished, Isabella fell into Austin's lap and they started kissing passionately. "That was amazing. You are amazing," said Austin as she stroked her hair, pulling her closer. With their lips meeting and before Isabella had realized, Austin's fingers were inside her. She felt so wet she was completely dripping. Austin smiled at her as she fucked her, kissing her, caressing her ass with her other hand. Within 15 minutes, they found themselves in the pool naked, swimming, splashing, kissing. Isabella found Austin's nipples despite her protests. She reassured her no one was coming. Isabella's daydream of playing with Austin in the pool, making her come in the water as she watched her beautiful face, became a reality. The rooftop was the best sexual experience of her life yet. She knew for sure when she felt that time stopped, and all that was left in the world was her and Austin exhausted, tangled up in the cool water. After a while, they decided it was time to head back to the room. Neither said much as they did. In the room, they removed their wet clothes. Isabella wanted a shower to wash the chlorine off. Austin pulled her close, kissed her, and told her to go ahead. Isabella took a quick shower, called for Austin a couple of times. When she didn't respond, Isabella went back to the main room wrapped in a towel. Austin was nowhere to be seen. On the bedside table were 2 books, a small box, and a post-it. Isabella found a white opal ring set in silver in the box. The post-it read, "I can't say goodbye, Isabella. I just can't. Please forgive me, and remember your promise to read the books. Thank you for everything. Austin." Isabella held the books close to her chest for a while. She started reading the first one, Pride and Prejudice, in bed that night smiling, as she read lines similar to what she and Austin might have said in their aristocratic games. Chapter 9. Nothing Left to Lose. Austin buried her face in her pillow and cried for what felt like hours after she left Isabella's room. She thought she was being totally ridiculous. She had only known her for about a month. She hadn't been able to bring herself to follow through with their plan the night before, but had instead called her mother sobbing. Her mother spoke to her gently, consoling her. She listened to her story and seemed to understand why she felt she couldn't share the increasing depths of her emotions with Isabella. Her mother helped her understand that although this was a big emotional impasse, there was a small chance that Isabella felt the same way. Austin realized that she could say something, though she couldn't stay for the answer. She chose 2 books that she had loved for various reasons out of her bookshelf, Pride and Prejudice, because it was sure to make Isabella smile. Besides, there was certainly something about Mr. Darcy's apparent aloofness that reminded of Isabella's ice queen behavior on occasion. The second book was The Price of Salt. She had initially come across it when taking a course in LGBTQ literature in college, and had really come to appreciate that it was the first book to have a happy-ish ending for 2 women, ever. It had become an incredible movie with Cate Blanchett as a lead character, Carol. Carol reminded her of Isabella. God damn it. Everything reminded her of Isabella. In the middle of the book, on a page that was half empty between chapters, Austin wrote her message to Isabella. She signed it with a kiss, using the mauve lipstick Isabella had loved seeing her in. There was nothing she could do now except cry, eat pizza, cry more. For the first time in a long time, Austen allowed herself to wallow. She was off work for a couple of days and stayed at home. She read Little Women for what must have been the 15th time. She watched Breakfast at Tiffany's, as was part of her breakup routine, and ate buckets of Ben & Jerry's chocolate fudge brownie ice cream. At about 3 p.m., her phone rang. It was the familiar number of the hotel switchboard. She wanted to ignore it. But it might be Linda in need, and Austen didn't want to leave her boss in a tricky situation. Yes, she was in a terrible mood. But there was nothing physically wrong with her. She picked up. "Is this Miss Austen Adams?" said an unfamiliar male voice. "Yes, this is she," responded Austen. "My name is Bruce Williams. I'm one of the hotel managers. I need to speak to you in person, Miss Adams. Can you please come in this afternoon?" Yes, I suppose." "Thank you. Is 4 p.m. okay?" "Yes, I'll see you then," said Austen, perplexed. Austen really wasn't in the mood as she entered the meeting with Bruce. She could barely stop crying long enough for it not to be weird. She could never have guessed what it was about and didn't try. Instead, she allowed the shock to wash over her as a relatively apologetic Bruce Williams explained that her and Isabella's rooftop adventure had been caught on the security cameras. He elaborated that there was no way she could continue working at the hotel following this, as the rumor was already murmuring through the halls, and it would set a bad precedent to be seen as allowing someone to break the rules. He mentioned some legal jargon about their contracts, advised that her final check would be sent to her, and that he had left it with the bar manager whether to give her a reference or not, but made sure she understood that the hotel was not legally obliged to, seeing that she had broken her contract of employment. Austen just nodded, dazed in disbelief, and with no grounds for protest. She even thanked him, absurdly enough. On her way home, she picked up a bottle of tequila, some limes, and another tub of Ben & Jerry's. A consoling text arrived from Linda, advising that she would of course give her a reference. The next few days were just a daze. Austen kept to herself, reading her books, occasionally crying. She played with and fed Pebbles when she visited. Eventually, Mrs. Burkhoff came knocking on the door. She invited Austen to dinner and persuaded her that a home-cooked meal of pierogi and borscht was going to do her good. Austen couldn't object to that. Evening came and she found herself showered, dressed, and even in a bit of makeup to her own amazement. Mrs. Burkhoff had indeed made what looked like a delicious meal, and had put out a bottle of red wine on the table. The old woman seemed to understand that Austen's troubles were related to Isabella and consoled her. Austen also told her about losing her job with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Burkhoff stood up and brought a bottle of vodka. "When troubles are this big, we need something stronger, right?" said Mrs. Burkhoff as she generously poured the vodka into glasses on the rocks, handing one to Austen. "I know you like that job, Draga. I know," continued Mrs. Burkhoff as she patted her on the shoulder. "It'll be okay. You'll see. You'll see." Austen smiled at the nickname. Many years ago, when Mrs. Burkhoff had started calling her that, she had wondered what it meant. But eventually, a Romanian friend of hers had shed light on the mystery. She thanked the old lady, taking a long sip of the vodka. "You have some money for food and such?" asked the old lady. Austen reassured her and thanked her for her concern. It wasn't that bad after all. Austen felt suddenly grateful that she had so many wonderful people in her life. She wasn't unloved or homeless. She had just lost a job and had a torrid affair. That's all. "What do you think you will do now?" "Oh, I don't know. Find a new job, probably," said Austen with a sigh. "Maybe it's time for a change, no, Draga?" said Mrs. Burkhoff, looking her straight in the eye with the piercing look she occasionally adopted, showing the real wisdom behind her kind face. "You think maybe it's time to just be an artist?" "Well, I do have some commissions from your friends that I should start working on, and there is this—" "No, never mind," said Austen after a pause. "What is this never mind?" questioned Mrs. Burkhoff, taking a deep sip of her vodka. Austen explained about the art competition. Mrs. Burkhoff patiently listened, then said, "Why not? Why not?" Austen thought about it for a while, then said, "I guess it'll be very difficult, but not impossible." Mrs. Burkhoff smiled. "You're young. You can work hard for 3 months. Pebbles and I will help, you'll see. It'll be done in no time, and hopefully you will be successful, Austen.
You are very talented. You just have to believe it yourself."
Austin smiled. She felt so much better. Things were in clearer perspective. She just had to get to work and que sera, sera. If it was to be, it would be. The commissions she had would keep her afloat for a couple of months. She could work a quarter of the time on them and the rest on the exhibition. She could do it. Maybe. That night, Austin slept more comfortably than she had for days. She dreamt of Isabella, but these were more pleasant dreams. The following morning, she wasted no time. She cleaned out her room, got rid of any evidence of wallowing, and put the breakup movies and books away. She became laser-focused on her work. Linda called her that evening to see how she was doing, and Austin shared her plans and thanked her now ex-boss for all her help and support. Linda was, as always, kind and full of Southern charm, wished her the best, and promised to call her if she found any good moonlighting gigs at weddings where she dabbled occasionally. They agreed to stay in touch, and Linda advised that she would be there on the opening of the exhibition once Austin was chosen. Austin felt filled with warmth that so many people rooted for her. She decided to let her closest friends and family know of her plan to help her remain accountable. There was no time to waste. Time seemed to fly despite her best efforts. Everyone who knew what they were talking about kept advising her to make sure she had a strong web presence. Eventually, Austin relented and thought about Isabella. She created accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and paid a college student $50 to help her create a website. She felt it was too little, but she didn't have much, and $50 went a long way in her college days. Besides, she could always pay them more later when she could afford it. 6 weeks passed, and Austin remained absolutely engrossed in her work. She often thought about Isabella, seeing that a lot of the work was inspired by her. One of the pieces most loved by her friends and Mrs. Burkhoff, who had taken to coming round a couple of times a week with a big box of pierogies, was a painting of Isabella the first time Pebbles had sat in her lap. She had used a loose impressionist style, and one of her friends wanted to buy the painting, making Austin promise it would be hers after the contest. When the 12-week mark arrived, her friends and family held a small party to celebrate the submission of her work. Her sister Brooklyn had picked her and Mrs. Burkhoff up to take them to her parents' house a couple of hours away. Paris had reemerged from his hiding and had fantastic news of his own. He was going to veterinary school in the fall. His party would be held in a few weeks to celebrate his graduation. Life was resembling normal again. Austin drank for the first time in 12 weeks as they all celebrated. After a couple of drinks, she found herself missing Isabella more than ever, wanting to text her, to let her know that she had taken her advice. She started typing a few times but stopped. It was up to Isabella to decide whether she wanted to contact her once she'd read the message in the book. She decided to stay at her parents' house for a few days to have a break and enjoy the country. Incidentally, both Paris and Brooklyn were also staying for a few days, so they had a reunion at an unusual time of year. They played board games, went for long walks with the family dog, Florence. Austin returned home feeling nearly restored and had a calm rhythm of working on commissions and taking on the occasional shift at Linda's moonlight gig. Her mind often wandered to Isabella in those weeks. What was she doing? Had she read her message? Did Isabella miss her? She tried to keep these thoughts at bay. At Isabella's speed of light reading rate, she had probably read the message and decided against responding. Austin found herself sighing often, then focusing on her breath to stop herself ruminating. One evening, 3 weeks after the submission, she received an unexpected visit from Linda, who had come from the bar to see her. After greeting her and handing her a glass of wine and a plate of pasta, Austin wanted to know the reason for the unexpected visit.
"Kid, you must have a guardian angel," started Linda. "Do you remember an old man, a district judge who took a shine to you?"
Yes, he came to the bar once. Why?
Well, he was back a couple of days ago. Asked after you, said Linda between bites of pasta. I told him you'd love to pursue your art. He asked if you had a website or something. I thought nothing of it, so I wrote down your Instagram for him. Maybe he wanted to buy some art, you know.
Okay, said Austin tentatively, awaiting the completion of the story.
Austin, his goddaughter runs that big gallery next to the museum. He showed her your stuff. She loves it and wants to meet you, blurted Linda out quickly. She thinks she can sell your art for serious cash and is especially interested in working with you if you get picked for this competition thing. I came over to tell you and to give you this card so you can call her," she continued, handing Austin a card. Austin was in disbelief. Once the initial surprise wore off, the implication of what just happened hit her. She was nearly a recognized artist. Someone wanted to see and sell her art, not just commissions for friends and family, but a real gallery. She hugged Linda, and soon the two of them were jumping up and down in the small room. Once Linda left, Austin pinned the card next to the napkin with Isabella's lip print. She reflected on how much her life had changed in the last 4 months, more than it had in the last 5 years combined, all because she met Isabella. She would never have bothered with social media, competitions, or any such thing before. It wasn't fair that Isabella wasn't part of this chain of events she had unleashed. Austin thought about her a lot that night, allowing herself to remember, to smile, and to rejoice. As she closed her eyes, she thought of Tennyson's epic poem about his lost friend and thought to herself, "At least she's not gone, just not here, and if she never comes back, then old Tennyson was right. It is better to have loved and lost." Closing her eyes, she whispered, "There may still be a little hope." Chapter 10. Dust in the Wind. Isabella returned to her life. The niggling feeling she felt the night she didn't say goodbye to Austin subsided, but never quite went away. It would come on, just as strong as ever when something triggered it. It could be, but not limited to, seeing a cute androgynous girl, any movie or book with a Victorian theme, vegetarian sushi, even cocktails. She moped as much as she knew how to, never crying, never revealing any sign of anything being wrong. She kept close friends at arm's length, especially at the start, as she simply wasn't prepared for the 5th degree that would happen if she hinted it was about a girl. Isabella vowed that she was going to be fine. All relationships turned sour, and it's best to remember what she had with Austin with fondness rather than watch it disintegrate. They were completely different people, with different priorities, not to mention the 20-year age difference. Any other outcome would be madness, and if anything, Isabella Peters prided herself in her sanity and rational decision-making. The plan for training new employees had been a hit and their sales started picking up since making the announcement. The scheme set up by marketing allowing customers to donate $1 for a development project in the area was also successful, and soon they would need to decide on the venture. She planned a trip with some of the marketing team to go speak to the locals and see what they needed. They assured Isabella that her presence would be highly beneficial from a strategic standpoint, and so the tickets were booked, and the team would be on their way in 2 weeks. When her friend Ida finally got a hold of her, generally difficult with a transcontinental time difference and someone is actively avoiding contact, she suggested that they meet for a vacation in Thailand after her business visit. "You have to have a little fun, too," she insisted while shouting at her daughter and wife to come be part of the persuasion party over Skype. Isabella couldn't really say no to seeing the nearly grown-up Maria, and she hadn't seen Ida or her wife Alice for 3 years. With their collected effort, they persuaded her, so a week-long work trip added a 2-week holiday. Isabella hadn't had a vacation longer than 3 days in over 10 years. Once the idea had sunk in, she found herself quite excited and started reading guidebooks, looking for interesting places to go. Before the flight out, she double-checked her packing. She had loaded her Kindle with books and decided against taking Austin's second book with her. Although 5 months had passed, she hadn't been able to bring herself to read it. Pride and Prejudice had been an entertaining read, but the tiny scribbles with Austin's thoughts and notes for what was probably a class or a bittersweet element. She would find herself laughing, thinking that was exactly what Austin would say, miss her terribly, then go through a dance of picking up her phone to send a message, to only decide that she would be hurting her more if she got in touch. The price of salt would have to wait, maybe for a very long time. The business part of the trip was incredibly eye-opening for Isabella. The factory managers had shown her around, explained the new changes they had implemented, including timestamps, safety features, and training and progression opportunities.
She came to understand that under Thai law, these features would have needed to be provided all along, but that they were circumvented previously. The staff were smiling, she noted, even when they weren't aware she was nearby, joking with each other, and the atmosphere seemed far from oppressive. Still, she wanted to leave nothing to chance, so she hired a private interpreter for 2 days and went around talking to people with her marketing team close at hand, documenting everything. Her information gathering had resulted in a clear winner in terms of how the workers wanted any extra money spent. They wanted better opportunities for their children. Some wanted a healthcare plan, which would need a little more planning, but might be possible to provide with a little thought. On our second-to-last day there, an older woman approached her, politely speaking to the interpreter and explaining that she and the other workers wanted to invite Isabella and the rest of the team to a goodbye party to thank them for all they had done. Isabella smiled and agreed. Seeing the accommodations of the workers and how humbly they lived really moved something in Isabella, something she had never felt before. When one of the women had explained the improvements her family had been able to make to their home once she received a better salary, simple things, like fixing the roof and adding the most basic of furniture, Isabella felt the tears well up but held back. She thanked the woman for sharing her story. Another woman explained with tears in her eyes that her 16-year-old daughter, who was hoping to go to university, was able to continue her schooling because of her improved income. Isabella couldn't really hold back then. She cried too. They needn't be thanking her. None of this would have been theirs if it weren't for Austin. She continued speaking to the employees, listening to their stories, ate food as they did, and felt ashamed of her team who either didn't touch the food or just complained about things, only to realize that there was a day she may have behaved similarly. The children invited them to play soccer, and Isabella stood in her heels about to decline when a thought hit her. What would Austin do? This had been her creation, so what would she do? The answer was easy. Kicking her shoes off, she ran among them and passed the soccer ball along. Some of the parents joined in, and Mark, the least obnoxious of the marketing team, joined in too. They had fun, and the children seemed genuinely fascinated that they managed to get the Westerners to play. Her team stared both in shock and awe that she was making a fool of herself pretending to lose a game. Leaving for her vacation, Isabella had become very pensive. She was deep in thought about what would have been the fate of these workers had plans not changed. Of course, those children deserved an education and opportunities for development and enjoyment. Their parents deserved to feel that their hard work could earn them a living and that they can be safe to have the necessities of life. She had taken so much in her own life for granted and would probably have continued to do so if she hadn't had this experience. On the first day of her vacation, she put the opal ring Austin had left her on her left little finger and vowed to read the price of salt as soon as she got home. It took Ida all of 2 days to send Alice and Maria on a snorkeling trip and start quizzing Isabella on why she was being weird. She didn't accept the answer about the work trip, declaring that the Isabella she knew would just be happy it was being fixed now and focus on the positive aspects. Isabella sighed. There was no point in trying to hide anything from Ida. She had somehow retained X-ray vision into her even after not being in touch as regularly and seeing each other so rarely. Eventually, Isabella suggested she tell her over a bottle of wine at the beach. Isabella wasn't sure what to say. She spoke about her connection with Austin, the fun they'd had, how this whole thing had been her idea, and how terrible she felt when Austin left that night. Ida listened patiently, only interjecting occasionally to clarify details. So you think she would have liked to have more of a relationship? Isabella thought. Austin had never said that. But Austin wouldn't say that, considering how determined and clear Isabella had been about what she wanted. Shaking her head, she said, I'm not sure, but I think she would have agreed to try if I suggested it. Why didn't you? Asked Ida, sipping her wine. Well, you know me. I don't do relationships. Besides, it would be completely impractical. She is at least 20 years younger than me, and she is so different from me. She lives in an entirely different world, answered Isabella. You did relationships when we were together, remember? Said Ida, putting her hand on Isabella's. And actually, you had a lot of good relationships, until the one that shall not be named. She continued, raising her eyebrows. Isabella sighed, watching the pink sunset as she held Ida's hand. She knew she was right. She had fond memories of relationships, falling in love, even considering marrying in her earlier years. She had dismissed it all as notions, but who was she to say? Ida had been with Alice for nearly 20 years. They had a daughter and a happy life. They were so secure in their love that neither would even think to prohibit the other to see or spend time with an ex-lover. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. She just felt so conflicted. Gently, Ida said in her most maternal voice, "Grapefruits, you have to face it. You're in love." Isabella burst out laughing while continuing to cry. Her friend was right. She was in love and terrified. "Hey, what have you done to Isabella?" Alice's voice cut across the beach as she and Maria headed towards them. "Can I tell them?" said Ida, beaming and clapping her hands. Isabella nodded. It felt nice not to have to carry Austen like a secret that never happened. "Isabella is in love!" Ida exclaimed. Maria sniggered and Alice catcalled toward the ocean. Of course, the three of them wanted to know everything. And suddenly Isabella found herself smiling and laughing as she recounted the most prized memories of her time with Austen, the family-friendly version, including petting Pebbles for the first time, seeing her art on the napkin with the lip imprint, eating fushi, playing Victorians, laughing until they nearly fell to the floor. The remainder of the vacation felt lighter. She enjoyed the beach, the food, massages, cocktails, and generally felt good by the end of it. Without realizing it, she started collecting little things, shells, cards, small tokens from local markets for Austen. She decided that she would get in touch with her and try to talk to her when she got home. On their last day, Alice said, "You didn't tell us that this Austen Adams you're infatuated with is a famous artist." She gestured at her screen to a picture of Austen wearing the hat Isabella had given her, looking beautiful as ever. "I thought you said she was a bartender who painted," continued Alice. They all gathered around the iPad. Isabella couldn't believe it. Austen was one of the finalists to the big art competition she had linked her. The page Alice was viewing was an interview on their official website. "I didn't know," responded Isabella, unable to take her eyes off the screen. As Alice scrolled through the interview, Isabella saw some paintings she recognized, as well as some new ones. She read the lines fast, asking Alice to stop scrolling at the point where Austen was asked about her inspiration for the work. "Austen, I loved her, and it was the beginning of everything." Reporter, "Is that a quote?" Austen, "Yes, an adapted one by F. Scott Fitzgerald." Reporter, "Is she the woman we see through your work? Can you tell us anything more about her?" Austen, "She's a Venezuelan cabaret performer, or a Victorian lady who really loves a ball. I am not entirely sure which. Probably both. I have never known a woman more charming or enigmatic." Isabella read the article over and over. Austen was now on all social media platforms, her art visible, spreading the message about the upcoming exhibition. It was clearly Isabella that Austen had referred to in the article. Isabella found herself alone with her thoughts on the flight home. Did this successful Austen want to see her? She could have moved on. The thought of Austen in the embrace of another woman made Isabella's stomach churn. Should she call? Should she just show up? No, that was much too intrusive. Austen's big opening event was the following night. She couldn't disrupt that. Having not slept at all on the plane, Isabella headed straight to bed. She couldn't sleep, tossed, turned. Finally, she got up and made herself a martini, drank it fast, made another. Without realizing what she had done, she had texted Austen, just a simple, "Hey, are you awake?" The message ticked as read within a few seconds, and a response appeared on the screen. "Yeah, can't sleep. Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine." Isabella followed it with, "I'm sorry, I miss you." No response for the longest time. Isabella counted 5 sips of her drink before the answer arrived. "Miss you too. Did you read the books?" "I read Pride and Prejudice, but I haven't had time to read The Price of Salt yet." "You should." "Maybe you can tell me why it's such a good read over a drink sometime." "I could, but you promised, remember?" What was Austen thinking? She hadn't declined seeing her, at least. Why did she want her to read the book so bad? Isabella sighed and started looking for it. She would probably not sleep before she read it. She searched her entire home, looked everywhere, turned cushions, but it was nowhere to be found. She sighed. What was she doing? She could just buy a new copy. Cursing at the state of her apartment, she sent the book to her Kindle, made a double espresso, and started reading. She read all night, only stopping to go to the bathroom and occasionally walk around the room. Was the book meant to convey some hidden meaning? Some parts of the story were similar to theirs, but most of it didn't quite match. Isabella didn't understand. When she finished, she texted Austin. "I've read the book now." A response came fast. "What did you think?" "I think it's really complicated and beautiful, and I really want to discuss it with you." "Okay." "Great. When would you like to talk?" "I can head to town anytime you're free." Then Isabella continued in a different message. "I know you're probably quite busy tonight. In the week?" "Isabella, seriously, you know about tonight, and you don't think I would want you to be there?" "No, it didn't cross my mind. Sorry." Isabella's heart was racing. Austin wanted her to be there. Tonight? "Okay, just come whenever. I don't have a lot of rigid plans apart from tonight." Isabella started typing. "Do you want me to come tonight?" but decided against it. Then she typed a heart emoji and decided against that too. Finally, after an hour of anxious deliberation, she had a shower, packed a bag including her eclectic collection of gifts from Thailand, threw it in her Corvette, pulled up the GPS, and drove. Although it was 6 hours there, she just didn't want to deal with airports again for a while. The drive was amazing. It had been ages since Isabella had driven on the open road. The sun was blazing, and she played music loudly as she sang along. Halfway there, she called her cleaning lady. "Hey, Annie, how have you been?" Good. How was the trip?" "It was amazing. I'll tell you about it next time I see you. Listen, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I really messed the apartment up yesterday looking for something." "Oh no, double charge this week," joked Annie. "Of course, but listen, it's a book called The Price of Salt. Can you keep an eye out for it?" "Ah, Miss Isabella, I gave that one away with a couple of other ones. You left them where you normally leave things for charity." "On the dresser on the right, of course," sighed Isabella. Well, that was one mystery explained. Annie told her she'd check if it was possible to retrieve it. As she hung up, the song Dust in the Wind came on, and she found herself laughing. The rest of the drive was smooth. She finally found herself outside Austin's, 2 hours before the event was due to start. Her smartwatch started beeping as she stood outside. Her heart rate was 195. Trying to catch her breath, her heart wouldn't slow down. Her thoughts were spinning as she rang the buzzer. After a while, it became apparent Austin wasn't home. Isabella sighed. Her grand gesture was not to come to fruition. As she was heading back to her car, Mrs. Burkhoff called her, waving from the window. She greeted her and asked if she knew where Austin was. Mrs. Burkhoff said she did know, but wanted to know if Isabella knew what an important day it was for Austin today. "Yes, I know. I want to be here for her, if she wants me to," sighed Isabella. "And stay here if she wants you to?" asked the old woman pointedly. Isabella nodded with tears in her eyes. Yes, of course she would stay. "Austin has just gone to the store to get some snacks. Paris, her sisters, and Linda are coming in half an hour to keep her busy, so she doesn't go too crazy before the big event." "Ah, okay. Maybe better if I come back later then." "I thought you wanted to be here to stay. Better wait in her apartment, no? For big romantic gesture?" nodded Mrs. Burkhoff. Isabella laughed. "Yes, please. I think that would be wonderful." Mrs. Burkhoff let her in. Isabella looked around the familiar room. The napkin with her lip imprint was still there. There were fewer paintings than usual. Then the panic struck her again. What was she going to say? Would Austin really be happy to see her? Did she need a big romantic gesture? What could she do? Isabella paced around the room, then it struck her. She needed a variation of Mr. Darcy's speech that he first made when telling Elizabeth he loved her. Yes, that could work. Isabella found the original quote and rewrote it slightly to suit what she wanted to say. She practiced as she paced. "Austin, it will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. In declaring myself thus, I am fully aware that I am going against the rules I have lived by for the past 20 years. Walking back and forth, she said it again and again till she felt she knew it by heart. But she kept pacing. She couldn't stop. In the end, to help manage her anxiety, she put on her wireless headphones and played classical music while repeating her love declaration over and over. She was fully engrossed, making it more and more grand as she practiced. She was halfway through it when she jerked as someone was tapping her on the shoulder. It was Austin. She pulled the headphones off and looked at Austin. Austin looked back. Isabella didn't know what to say. She froze. "Did you have something you wanted to say there, Lady Izzy?" said Austin mildly. Isabella quivered. She couldn't remember a word of the prepared phrase. Tears started rolling down her cheeks as she looked Austin in the eye. Austin, I think I love you." Austin smiled, and Isabella felt like the whole world lit up. They were the only two people left in it. She felt Austin's hands on her hips. The familiar teasing look came across her face as she said, "I think I want the other version, with ardent admiration and love." She winked at Isabella. They both burst into laughter as they held each other tight. They were both crying and blurting things out too fast. Who could ever have guessed? Isabella Peters was in love. And it was reciprocated. And maybe, just maybe, she thought, there could be a happy ending. Her lips found Austin's, and for the first time in months, she felt peace. Chapter 11. Orlando. The exhibition was an absolute success, and Austin won second prize. It was enough to set her career up for years to come. Almost all the pieces she had shown sold, and for more money than she could have hoped for. Isabella rented a penthouse with a small terrace half an hour's walk from Austin's studio the following week. They agreed to date and enjoy each other's company, taking things slow. Her business did not mind Isabella's moving, as she could manage most of her work remotely, and she still had her apartment if she needed to make the occasional appearance. Isabella felt joy dissimilar to anything she had felt for years as she and Austin joked, read, watched movies, and of course enjoyed each other's bodies. The sex remained just as amazing as when they first met, even 3 years into their relationship. Austin stayed at Isabella's 4 or 5 nights a week almost immediately, but she kept her own apartment, which over time became more and more of an actual studio. They took domestic and exotic trips, and Isabella made a tradition of the yearly trip to see how the workers were doing and enjoy the beautiful country with Austin, who traveled more and more as her career took off. She exhibited her work in cities like New York, London, and Paris, though the one they had the greatest fun with was Austin, Texas. They knew their jokes were cheesy, but loved having them nonetheless. One day, Austin did not arrive in time for cocktails. Isabella was mildly concerned and tried calling her, but didn't get an answer. She tried Paris, who was now nearly a qualified veterinarian, but he didn't respond either. Isabella had become accustomed, and in her own words, spoiled by how reliable Austin was, so a 30-minute delay without a message was enough to get her attention. When she was an hour late, Isabella decided to head over to the studio where she was working to make sure all was well. Isabella rang the buzzer to Austin's, but there was no answer. She rang again, and this time Austin stuck her head out of Mrs. Burkhoff's window. "Oh, Isabella, I'm so sorry. I left my phone downstairs. Pebbles is unwell. Come up." She buzzed her in. Isabella ran up the stairs, her heart skipping a beat. She had come to really care about Pebbles and didn't know how to handle this news. She walked in to find Mrs. Burkhoff crying in one corner. Austin was petting Pebbles, who was lying on the carpet, yowling. "Have you called a vet? Have you called Paris?" cried Isabella as she sat on the floor next to Austin. "Paris is on his way. His clinic is only 15 minutes, and the vet is staying late doing paperwork, so he's told her Pebbles might need attention," replied Austin. Isabella felt tears coming up. In the years she'd known Austin, she'd learned that it was okay to cry. "What do we do?" Austin held her hand, putting the other hand on Pebbles' head. "We sit with her and wait for help," she said, squeezing Isabella's hand. Isabella squeezed her hand back and reached out to hold Mrs. Burkhoff's hand. Paris arrived a few minutes later. He asked how long Pebbles had been this distressed. Mrs. Burkhoff said a few hours. He examined Pebbles and looked at Mrs. Burkhoff.
"Do you think Pebbles has gained some weight?"
he asked.
"Yes, a little, but she likes her food and I spoil her,"
replied Mrs. Burkhoff.
"Is she sick because I fed her too much?"
she wailed.
"I don't think so, Mrs. Burkhoff,"
replied Paris as he pressed around Pebbles' belly. He listened with his stethoscope, felt her belly again, then looked at Mrs. Burkhoff.
"Was Pebbles spayed?"
he asked.
"No, she never had any operations, just vaccinations. A microchip, deworming," listed Mrs. Burkhoff.
"So you're sure she's not been spayed?" asked Paris, raising his eyebrows.
"Of course I'm sure. Why?"
Austen and Isabella were watching, now more in tune with what might be going on. Austen threw Isabella a smile, and they squeezed each other's hands again.
"Well, I think we've solved the mystery then," said Paris. "You're going to be a grandma," he told Mrs. Burkhoff.
"Pebbles, you make the nasty with a gentleman cat!" exclaimed Mrs. Burkhoff.
Everyone laughed, but Paris was rather serious. He explained that because Pebbles was a little older and never had kittens before, it was best that they go to the veterinary clinic. They all set off in his car. Isabella volunteered to hold Pebbles in her carrier and stroked her head the whole way to the clinic. The vet decided they would have to do a cesarean, and after what seemed like an eternity, 3 anxious and pacing women were invited in to meet Pebbles' 5 kittens. Adorable gray and white babies all crawled around her. A couple of them were feeding while Pebbles was grooming one. The vet explained that all the kittens were full term, and Pebbles should make a full recovery. She thanked Mrs. Burkhoff for agreeing to having Pebbles spayed at the same time to ensure there would be no more babies after this set. Pebbles was allowed home the following morning, and Austen and Isabella visited to help Mrs. Burkhoff with the kittens every day, as there was a lot of organizing, cleaning, and other tasks to complete. In reality, Isabella could not stay away from the kittens, and to her own surprise found herself totally enamored with them. The kittens grew older. Mrs. Burkhoff started finding homes for them. In the end, there was just 2 left. One day she took Isabella aside and said,
"Tomorrow you bring a cat carrier and take your one home. I will keep the other to keep Pebbles company."
Isabella was in disbelief. Her kitten? She had never asked to adopt a kitten. She told Austen about this, who just beamed and said, "Of course you want a kitten." "But I wouldn't know what to do with it, or how to take care of it," protested Isabella. "Yes, you would. You've been taking care of them for 12 weeks already, and the one Mrs. Burkhoff picked for you is a girl. She sits in your lap every time you visit, just like Pebbles does. She wants to be your kitten." "I don't know, Austen. What if—" Austen smiled and took Isabella's hand. "I will be there with you every step of the way. She can be our kitten if you want." Isabella beamed. She and Austen were adopting a kitten. She hadn't even realized she'd wanted to until it seemed decided. Then it was the most obvious thing. Of course they were going to home one of the kittens. "Do you know what we should name her, Miss Adams?" asked Isabella. "But of course, Miss Peters." They both giggled. Then Isabella turned to Austen and in a serious voice said, "Do you think Orlando can be trained to be the ring-bearer when I marry you?" Austen choked on her drink, and after a short coughing fit, she looked at Isabella and asked her to repeat what she'd just said. Isabella reached into her purse and produced a box. Opening it, she revealed an antique ring with a small sapphire. "We don't hand down interesting names in my family, but occasionally there is a nice piece of jewelry. This one was my grandmother's." Austen stayed quiet, for it seemed like an eternity. She looked Isabella in the eye and took her hand. "Darling, I think Orlando can officiate if we want." Isabella put the ring on Austen's finger after showing her the engraving, "Miss Climax Adams, whom I love." For herself, Isabella kept the opal ring that Austen had left her all those years ago. The new chapter of their lives as an engaged couple co-parenting a sassy feline began that day. Life was filled with joy, family and friends, laughs, and the occasional curse as Orlando kept them on their toes knocking over potted plants, scratching as she accidentally jumped in the shower, and purring in their lap as they drank cocktails on the terrace, watching the sunset. This concludes Serving the CEO by Emily Hayes. Narrated by Abby Craden. Copyright 2022, by Emily Hayes. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Emily Hayes and was produced in the year 2024 by Tantor Media Incorporated, a division of Recorded Books which holds a copyright thereto. Please visit tantor.com for more information on our growing library of unabridged audiobooks.